I'm Brett Johnson, former United States most wanted cyber criminal, now good guy. Or, as the United States Secret Service called me, the original internet godfather. Now, how did I get that title? 39 felonies, a place on the United States most wanted list, and escaped from prison. And I built and ran the first organized cybercrime community. It was called Shadow Crew. It was a precursor of today's darknet markets, laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels operate today. Those 39 felonies had to do with refining, implementing, and just outright doing modern financial cybercrime as we know it today. Now, look, there is a whole story behind all that we do indeed have time to go into today, because today it's time for the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode, the Brett Johnson story, how to become an internet godfather, when we come back. All right, so we are back to the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode 36, the Brett Johnson story, how to become an internet godfather. And I don't know why it's taken 36 episodes to get to this point. You know, usually a podcast or a video show like this, you would know the host would come in the first 2 to 3 episodes and would do their bio. Hey, this is who I am. This is why I do the shit I do today. Nope, not here. Here it's taken to episode 36 to get to where we are, but we're here. And there's a variety of reasons. You know, I did the Lex Fridman show, and that's an outstanding breakdown of the story. My story has been out in different magazines, things like that as well. So I was really wanting to get off the ground with this show without having to go into that story initially. And then, of course, Friedman's episode comes out and the Concrete episode comes out and all this other stuff happens. And I'm like, there's no real need to really do my bio yet. So I kept putting it off for various reasons. But here we are today, and we're going to dive right the hell into it after we get through with some viewer comments. Because we always do viewer comments. Hey, so I was, as I said, I've been on Lex Fridman's episode 272, the Concrete show, episode 134. I'm going to be on Megyn Kelly's show, July 19th. I'm talking to a network to do a television program, some other stuff as well. So things are going pretty good. If you've not caught me on Netflix yet, I'm on Netflix Web of Make-Believe, the 2 Stingray episodes about this gentleman named Daniel Rigmaiden, who I taught how to do tax return identity theft, and then I set him up to get arrested. Not my proudest moment, and certainly not his. Anyway, I'm in a good mood today. We'll see if it continues as I talk about my story, because it's up and down, and I think hopefully it ends on a good note. Now, from the Concrete show, had this gentleman, Pyro Archie. He commented 4 days ago, and he says, hey, Brett really tells the story of his childhood very well and in a comedic tone, even though at the core, it is extremely sad and heartbreaking. Really shows how that even raised in a hellish, abusive, and violent childhood, you can still change for the better. I was lucky to be raised by 2 loving and caring parents. Looking back, I was very lucky to have such a great environment to grow up in. I still rebelled to my parents a lot, always wanted to make my own decisions and choices, even if they were the worst possible ones. I had every option and path to a greater adult life, but I took the path of crime. I always did not like crimes that affected the victims, and it took around 10 years or so for me to stay away from those types of crimes that affected the average person. I now wish that I had listened to my parents and took every piece of advice that they had tried to give me. I would be in a much greater position in life now, but you can't dwell on these types of things. You have to just get up and move on to a better life. I mean, what do you say to that? What do you say to that? I mean, absolutely. And here's the thing. I've said this on this show. I've said it in interviews, on recordings for television, with documentaries, with in publications and everything else. I don't blame my childhood on my choices as an adult. As a child, you can't help that. You're going to do what the adults in your circle are doing. But as an adult, you have the option, you have the choice as to what you do. Do you let that control you and then become the mirror image of the environment in which you grew up in, or do you choose to be a better person? This individual here, he evidently had great parents, and they tried to do the right thing, but he chose to take the path less traveled, and I hope you're doing better. I do. I hope you're doing better. I'm a firm believer that it's not our ending that counts. It's the journey that gets us there and what we learn along the way. All right. And I say that because my journey's been this hellacious journey, and I like to think that I've learned a lot along the way, and I'd like to hope that I continue learning as I go forward. Okay. I really hope the best for you. I truly do. I hope everything's working out. I hope you and yours are well. You're welcome to reach out to me on my comment section. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can look at my website, everything else, and just contact me and reach out to me. Okay. I'd be happy to sit down and have a conversation with you, and we can go from there. But thank you for the comments. And I think that's an indicator that it doesn't matter sometimes whether your parents are really good people and they try their best to raise a really kind, decent, good human being, or if they're just abusive fucks and they don't really give a shit about the children that are in their environment. People can turn out either way. They can turn out good or bad, regardless of how that outcome is. I say that my choices as an adult are mine, and they are, but I also realize and recognize that there has to be some correlation and a causation to a degree of my upbringing and my choices as an adult. I agree that my choices as an adult are mine, but certainly my upbringing gave me the proper tools that I would need if I ever decided to go into a life of crime. So I just wanted to kind of share that. Moving along to some other comments. Let's see where we are. Okay, so we've got Derek Davis. He says he commented on the episode 35 of the Romance Scam Show. He said, "Hey, I'm from Hazard, Kentucky, bro." Well, hey, Hazard, Kentucky. Hope everything's going all right there, right in the heart of coal country. It's hard living, man. It's hard living. People who have not been to Eastern Kentucky, places like that, maybe out in the West, when you pass through some of these reservation lands where you've got this extreme poverty that's going on. If you've never seen that, you don't appreciate the hardships that come with living in those types of areas. So, hey, hats off to you. Keep your chin up, man. Hope everything's going all right that way. I'll get to Hazard at some point. I keep threatening to come back and visit my uncle, and I just need to get my ass up there and see him. All right, so here we've got, I had one lady that commented. Here she is. Her name is Mary. She said, "I really don't know why you don't have millions of subscribers. The way you're able to tell your personal stories and educate us at the same time is great. Have you ever thought about doing an episode on how we can protect our elderly parents?" Yes, as a matter of fact, I have. I'm going to have John Swartz. He's a former FBI agent. He's the gentleman that was largely responsible for getting me into Quantico to talk at the CISO Academy. And now that the pandemic is over, I'm hoping to get my ass back into Quantico and continue that. But John recently retired. He started up a nonprofit that has to do with elder abuse and elder fraud, countering that and educating on that. So I'm going to have John on, and we're going to talk about that. And hopefully that'll get some good information across and help everyone try to protect really the most vulnerable segment of our society, our senior citizens. All right. So, and also, hey, Mary, I agree with you. I wish that I had millions of subscribers too, but I don't right now. I don't. And I'm hoping, but I got to tell you, I right now got about 2,400 subscribers. That's a damn good number so far, especially for a cybersecurity show. If it was a true crime show, if I was talking about all these murders and everything, probably have a lot more people listening. But this is a cybersecurity, kind of the Brett Johnson trying to become a better guy show. So I really appreciate the subscribers that I've got, the comments that I get. I hope I get more, but I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter if I've got 0 subscribers or a couple million subscribers. Yeah, I'd profit a little bit more, but I'm still going to do the same type of show that I do right here, right now. All right, because it's not just a show for the viewers. It's also a show that lets me get a little therapy as I'm talking. I get to work out some issues. And sometimes as I'm talking about these crimes and scams and different frauds that are going on, sometimes as I'm talking, I have one of these aha moments and something new kind of pops in my head like, oh shit, I hadn't realized that before. So we're going to continue on with that regardless of whether we get more subscribers or not. Hopefully we will. All right. Speaking of that, I had this individual. He goes by the screen name and he's commented on a few episodes that I've recorded so far. Spam rice eggs or rice spam eggs. Well, I don't know what the dude's name is. Let me look it up here while we're talking. But anyway, this dude, what he does is I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to come out and say that he's a little bit south of legal, but he comes off like that sometimes. You know, he comes off like, hey, maybe everything's not quite kosher in, everything that's talking about that. So he's commented a few times, but on the Romance Scams episode, and I think he deleted the comment for some reason. Hey, dude, you don't have to delete your comments. You're not going to upset me. Like I said, I respond to everyone unless you just come off as a fucking idiot. And then I may even respond to you then as well. But his comment on the show, which I can't find now, so I assume he deleted the damn thing. His comment on the show was, hey, we want to know how to do these scams and frauds. The only reason you're doing this stuff here is because you're being paid to be a good guy. Dude, I about said get fucked, but I would never say that on a YouTube channel. Look, man, here's the deal. Yeah, I get paid. But I do a whole shitload of stuff for free, and I believe in what I'm doing. I was looking for a job when I got this one, and if all pay stopped today, I would still be doing the exact same thing that I'm doing. All right, I grew up as a lifetime criminal, served prison time, everything else, and then I was able and given the opportunity to turn my life around. I spent a lot of time thinking about my mistakes and everything that I had done and every single person that I had victimized throughout my entire life. People that I knew, didn't know, family, neighbors, complete, people that I would never meet or know what they look like or anything else. If you think that doesn't have an effect on you when you really are trying to be a better person, you are completely mistaken. All right. This idea that the only reason I'm doing this is because I'm being paid is not true at all. I would do it regardless. As a matter of fact, I started out doing it for free. As a matter of fact, I still today work with universities, law enforcement, all these other groups for free. If an individual has an issue and wants to contact me, they can. And by and large, I respond to that. Sometimes they have to chase my ass down because I'm busier than shit, but I respond. And if I can help you, I will. Unfortunately, most of the time I can't because scammers out there, let's be honest, most of them are never going to be arrested. The money that they steal, you're not going to get that back. So the conversations that I have with a lot of victims is listening, just simple listening. Then I have to apologize that it happened to them. And then I have to be the son of a bitch that breaks the news to them that they're not getting their money back. Now, if you think that shit's easy, if you think that shit is worth any amount of money getting paid for, listen to somebody that's been victimized that you cannot help, you, sir, are wrong. Now, I don't know if you're a little south of legal or not. I suspect you are, but you'd better hope and pray that when you get caught, you've got somebody like me in your fucking corner that might be able to assist you and give you some direction on how best to navigate that prison environment, because believe you me, friend, you're probably going to need it. Now, that's about all I got to say about that. See, we get a little serious every now and then. It's true, guys. I mean, this is not easy. This is not easy. It's not easy getting up every single day, knowing the life that I've led, the people that I've harmed, and working my ass off to try to do the right thing. I don't think I can make amends, but try to level that scale out, because believe you me, I'm in deep default on the bad shit that I've done. If I can ever level it out, I don't know, but I damn well hope so. All right, so let's move right along and try to get on a happier note. Damn. I say that. All right, we're going to come back. We're going to come back and we're going to dive right into the Brett Johnson Show. Episode 36, The Brett Johnson Story, How to Become an Internet Godfather, when we come back. All right, so we're back again to the Brett Johnson Show, and I'm feeling a little bit better after that little downbeat tirade that your humble host went off on. So, hey, let's get started. Let's dive right into this shit. This right here. That's right. That right there. That is my United States Most Wanted picture. That's right. I was in Las Vegas, Nevada, the night before I'd stolen $160,000 out of ATMs, woke up the next morning, signed on to cartersmarket.com. There's my name, U.S. Most Wanted beside of it. Now, there are things in life known as aha moments. This was not an aha moment. This was more of an type moment. So I did what any normal person would do. I loaded up and I went to Disney World. That's right. I went to Disney World. Lasted about 6 weeks. United States Secret Service, they come and get me, arrest me, send me to prison. Then I escaped from prison. Well, I mean, I prefer not to think of it as escape. I think of it as the institution could no longer benefit me, so I decided to release myself on my own recognizance. That got me even more time. So the question is, for those who watch the Brett Johnson Show, who the hell is this guy? The United States Secret Service called me the original Internet Godfather. Now, how did I get the title? 39 felonies. Placed on the United States Most Wanted list, that escaped from prison, and I built and ran the first organized cybercrime community. It was called Shadow Crew. It was the precursor of today's darknet markets, laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels operate today. You guys have heard all of that in every single opening of the Brett Johnson Show. The big secret to all that, that is not where my life of crime began. It's not. See, I'm from Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky is one of these areas like the Panhandle of Florida, parts of Louisiana, that if you're not fortunate enough to be having a job, you may be involved in some sort of scam, hustle, fraud, whatever you want to call it. My mom, Carol Sue, was basically the captain of the entire fraud industry. No crime too big or too small. It's why at one point she steals a 108,000-pound Caterpillar D9 bulldozer. At another point, she takes a slip and fall in a convenience store, tries to sue the owner. That's my mom. We used to have a neighbor she acted as a pimp for. That's mommy. Dad. My dad was a good man. My dad is a good man. He truly is. My father is an outstanding human being. He just forgot that he was for a while. Back then, Dad was so worried about losing my mom, of her leaving, that he became basically the enabler in the family. If she wanted to commit a crime, he would co-sign on to it. If she wanted to abuse someone, he would not step in the way. And mommy was a very abusive person. She used to bring men home in front of my father. My father would sit there and cry and beg her not to do it, and she would do it anyway. Finally, she leaves the man. We were in Panama City, Florida at that point in time. We moved from Panama City back to Hazard, Kentucky. That's right, Hazard like the Dukes. We moved back to Hazard, Kentucky, right in the heart of coal country. And my mom she continued those ways. And I'm not talking, she would be negligent. But when I'm talking about abusive, she could be physical, but her heart was in the emotional, the mental, the verbal, just being negligent overall. She used to leave me and my sister at home for days at a time. And I'm the guy, the kid rather, that gets the worst part from my mom and my dad. From my mother, I get that criminal mindset. From my father, I get that fear of the people that I love leaving. So mom used to leave me and my sister. I was 10, my sister Denise 9. She used to leave us at home for days at a time. Sometimes she'd take us with her. We'd wait in the car as she went in and partied. Sometimes we'd wait in the living room as she adjourned to the bedroom. Most of the time she just left us at home. And I was the guy that I'd post up at the window, see if she's coming home. Sometimes I'd walk out into the driveway to see if she was driving down the street. Denise wasn't like that. Denise was the kid who just, at 9 years old, she just got angry. So where my life of crime begins, mom had been gone for a few days. We didn't have any food in the house. Denise walks in one day. She's got this pack of pork chops in her hand. And I'm like, where'd you get that? And she's like, I stole it. And I was like, show me how you did that. So she takes me over, shows me how she's stealing food. And I'm like, shit, that's the best idea ever. Let's do that. So we start stealing food. We get to where we need it. We want a sandwich. Well, you can't stuff a loaf of bread down your pants. It's going to get squished. So we looked across the way. There's a Kmart over there. I looked at my sister and I was like, let me see what I can do. Famous last words, by the way. Let me see what I can do. Looked at Denise. Let me see what I can do. I walked into the Kmart, got a hoodie off the rack, took the tags off of it, put the hoodie on, wore it out, got outside. And the way you steal bread, you walk into the A&P or whatever grocery store it is. You've got the hoodie slung over your shoulder. You stuff the bread down the sleeve of the hoodie, and you just walk out with it over your back. So we did that and noticed at Kmart. Well, Kmart's got a lot more, so it becomes like this perverted form of Maslow's hierarchy of needs: books, games, jewelry, music, clothes. Yes, until mom comes home, sees all the stolen loot, specifically sees the stolen in television that I've got hooked up to the TV playing it. And she's like, where did all this come from? Well, now, when you're 10 years old, you can't lie very well. And I've always been that liar. I looked at my mom. We found it. And she's like, no, you didn't find that. My sister Denise, 9 years old, she doesn't lie at all. She stands up, half proud, half pissed off. We stole it. My mom looks at my sister. Show me how you did that. And she joins us. Not only does she join us, but she goes to get her mother to join us as well. We become this intergenerational shoplifting ring in Eastern Kentucky. Used to take these road trips. They'd go to JCPenney's and steal clothes and jewelry. I'd go to the bookstore and steal books because that's the guy that I am. And here's the thing. I don't want you guys, I'm telling this story. I don't want you guys to think that I'm saying that my childhood resulted in my choices as an adult. That's not true. My choices as an adult are mine. My sister had the exact same upbringing that I did. Other than that one shoplifting experience, she goes off to be a teacher, a great parent, just a great citizen. Me? No, I'm the guy that kept on going. And as I kept going, I got more and more involved in the types of scams, hustles, and frauds that not only my mother, but that entire side of the family committed. Now, that's my childhood. And I've talked about that. I've talked about it a lot in a lot of different presentations and a lot of different interviews. And I'm doing it today on this show. But when I talk about that, as I say it, mentally, I start telling myself that it's not, that what I'm talking about wasn't that bad. But this is a mother, the environment that me and Denise were raised in. My mom was, I don't know if she was manic depressive. She was certainly a narcissist, but was she manic depressive? Was she just bug fuck crazy? I don't know, but probably yes to all of that. All right. This is a woman who was addicted to Valium. That's why I didn't use drugs. I didn't start drinking until I was 34. Because of my mom. I didn't want to be like my mother. I never had my own children. I've got 2 great stepsons right now. Actually, I've got 3. The third one, he was just in the military when I met his mom. But I've got 3 stepsons, and they are great human beings. They're going to be outstanding human beings as they go through this life journey. I never had children of my own because I was scared that I would be like my mother. And this is a mom, as we were coming up, she would tell me and Denise all the time that she had given up her life for us, that she was going to leave one day and never come back, that we would find her dead in a ditch someplace. This is my mother. My earliest memories of my mom, my earliest memories as a child, we were in Fort Lewis, Washington, me, Denise, my mom, and my dad. My dad was a captain in the military, a helicopter pilot. He was one of the first group of helicopter pilots that didn't get sent over to Vietnam. And to this day, the man believes that, hey, I should have been in that we were soldiers bullshit. I was probably supposed to die in Vietnam, but I'm damn glad you didn't, Dad. All right. But he believes that. But my dad, I mean, he's a good man. He just didn't know he had never been in a relationship, in an abusive relationship. And it's kind of like being a frog. You know, you hear these stories about the frog in water, and as you turn the water up, it continues to get there until it's boiling, and it doesn't know until it's too late. Dad had never been in an abusive relationship, and he didn't know how to cope or deal or handle anything like that. And I don't care if you're a man or a woman, if that shit happens to you and you've never seen that or been victim to that before, you don't know what the hell to do. Well, mom, this is a mom who like I said, she'd bring men home in front of my dad. She would tell me and Denise that she was going to leave and never come back, that we'd find her dead someplace. She would, just crazy, crazy stuff. I remember, I don't know if I've talked about this before. I think I've done on a couple of different interviews. I did it on the Anglerfish podcast. But I remember that we were in Florida, and my dad was gone off to work. What happens is my dad, he never really had any criminal ideas of his own. He just followed along with my mom, except for a couple of circumstances. One of those circumstances was he was watching 60 Minutes one night. And I mean, this man loved his 60 Minutes, and they had a 20-minute segment on the drug trade down in Miami. And he's watching the show, and Carol Susan's laying on the couch watching it with him, and she notices he's, focused in on this show, and they're showing the tables of cash, the pallets of cocaine, everything else. And he finishes watching the segment. He looks over at my mom, and he's like, I think I need to go down to Miami and get a job being a cop. And my mom, she zeroed in on it too. My mom's like, that's a damn good idea. So my mom had taken a slip and a fall and had sued this bunch, had gotten some money from that. Other than that, they start selling all the shit that they possibly can to get enough money up to go down to Miami so Dad can get a job being a cop, with the idea that, hey, I'll happen upon a drug deal. I'll let them keep the drugs. I'll keep the cash. Everything will be fine. I'm sitting there. I don't know. I'm like 8, 9 years old. I'm sitting there going, shit, won't they shoot you? Oh, no. And I'm like, I don't know why the hell they wouldn't. But anyway, they get everything in the U-Haul. It's me, Denise, Mom, Dad. Me and Dad are in the U-Haul. Denise and Mom are in this Chrysler Cordoba. I think it's a 78 model is what it was. A Chrysler Cordoba with a big-ass Doberman in the back, heading south on I-75 till we get to Miami. We get to Miami the night the Miami riots broke out. Turns out these cops had been in a car chase with this African-American individual. The guy had wrecked. The cops drug him out of the car and literally beat his ass to death. They then covered it up. Well, the night that everything came out that the cops had done this bullshit, the city, rightfully so, explodes. We get down there that night. My mom's like, holy shit, this is crazy. My dad's like, I'm going to cop school. Goes to cop school, comes back day one. I think everything's going to work out just fine. Goes to cop school the second day, comes back. He's like, we got to leave this fucking place. It's like, what happened? Well, what happened is during the cop training sessions, the real Dade County cops burst in and arrest like 6 or 8 of these guys that had outstanding warrants that had the exact same idea that Dad had. So they get They load everything back in the U-Haul, head north on I-75. No idea where they were going to go until they get up around Orlando, and both of them kind of remember at the same time, hey, we once spent spring break in Panama City, Florida. So just on that, they go to Panama City, Florida. My dad, the only job he could get was as a night clerk at a 7-Eleven, making $140 a week. My mom, she was an LPN nurse. She got a job in a nursing home, but this is a woman who would only keep a job long enough to see my dad off to work. Then she would quit her job and go out and party with other men. So we went broke in Panama City, absolutely broke. There were times when they would turn the power off almost monthly. The power would go off for a few days, or the water would be turned off, and we would wait until nighttime and get all the pots and pans. So it was me and my sister, my dad and my mom. We'd get all the pots and pans out and catch water when it would rain, so that we would have something, to brush our teeth or to drink, or try to, take a sponge bath in, stuff like that. And that's the environment until my mom leaves my dad. And my great grandfather had died. She told my dad that she was going to take us up to Hazard to attend the funeral. We didn't know, none of us knew except her, that what she was actually doing, she was leaving my dad. So she leaves my father, and I don't have a decent conversation with my dad again for, 20 years. 20 years. So that's what happened there. That was my mom. So when we were in Florida, I'm sorry to do that segue there, but when we were in Florida, my dad was off to work one night. My mom was home at that night. Me and Denise were in the bedroom playing video games, and we hear this yell, "Brett, Denise, come here." Of course, I didn't go by Brett then. My middle name's Shannon. It was Shannon, Denise, come here. So we look at each other like, what the hell? Put down the controllers. She's in the living room. She's got all the lights doused. She's got incense burning. She's got these candles burning in the living room. All the lights in the house are out. She's got in the middle of the living room floor these two chairs set up facing each other. And she proceeds to tell us that she sold her soul to Satan to ensure that me and Denise have a good life. That as soon as we graduate college, that Satan, the Lord Satan, is going to call her home. But it doesn't happen until we graduate college. And for us to for us to know, or to we have to show that we're worth it. And the way that we show that we're worth it, and hell, I'm probably 9, maybe 10 at that point. Denise is a year younger than I am. The way that we have to show or prove that we're worthy of this is that mom sits in one chair, we sit opposite of her, and we keep eye contact, a staring contest. And while we're staring, not blinking, while we're staring, mom lets Satan come out through her eyes, and we think happy Jesus thoughts to make sure that we're not possessed. And we play this game, taking turns, for hours. So that may sound, the thing is when you're a child, as an adult, you can look at the absurdity of that. When you're a child, you can't. That shit's serious when you're a child. So that's some of this environment that we grew up in. I remember that one time we come home, and me and Denise we rode the bus home. We get off the bus, and we're walking into the driveway, and the hood on the car is up, and we're like, what's going on? So we walked inside, and dad's not there, and mom, she's just sitting on the couch, and she used to do this thing where she crossed her legs and her foot would just be going 90 miles an hour, bouncing back and forth. So we walk in, where's dad? I don't know where he is. He's went someplace. Okay. So Denise notices that there's spaghetti on the stove. She goes over to get something to eat. And mom's like, oh no, don't eat that. That's for your father. So it turns out that what had happened was mom had cut the spark plug wires on the car so that dad couldn't get away. At the same time, she had fixed him a special meal, the spaghetti that had rat killer in it. He didn't eat the spaghetti, so she got behind the television set and cut the cable on the TV set. Then tells my dad, hey, Ray, For some reason, there's no picture on the TV. So he gets behind the TV, hunkers down, bends over behind the TV to see what's wrong. And while he's bent over, she takes this marble statue and clocks the guy in the fucking head. Got him bleeding and everything else. Well, where Dad was, because the spark plug wires had been cut on the car, he walks his ass to the hospital to get taken care of. So this is my mom. And my dad was, I look back now, and my sister has a lot of anger over what happened. And this is a child who, like I said, she was always angry. Even today, she's an angry individual. All right, she's truly angry. She got pissed off at me because of Lex Friedman, where I said that she developed a drinking habit when she was in school. And at one time, she tried to kill herself. Well, she had told me that in an interview. She just got mad at me because I guess I repeated it instead of her saying it, and wouldn't speak to me for a few weeks. But this is Denise. She's always had trouble handling what happened as a child. She blames my father for that, but I don't think what she realizes is, yes, he was the other adult in the area, but when you've never been victim to domestic abuse by that, I don't think that you really have the tools or the understanding on how to handle that. Yes, he was the adult, but still, I think there's reason for what went on. So this is something, another thing Mom did, and these are all, I give these specific stories, but these are stories that were almost every fucking day. This is not just something that would happen every 6 or 7 months. These were things that were going on every single day of our lives. For example, one day my mom, her and Dad used to lay in the bedroom and they would read. They were voracious, just avid readers, and they would lay on each opposite end of the bed and argue oftentimes too, and you'd hear Mom screaming, and Dad's favorite phrase were, "Carol Sue, I just don't understand what's wrong. What's wrong? What can I do? What do you want me to do?" That was his favorite phrase all the time, as she just screamed and yelled and said, "What you can do is you can die. I just want you to die." And she used to tell him, "I'm going to get it to the point where you commit suicide. I'm going to drive you to where you commit suicide." And she meant that shit. Well, this one specific day, they're in the bedroom arguing. Me and Denise are through the house someplace, and you hear her scream, "Shannon, Denise, come here." So we walk into the bedroom. Dad's laying there. He's like, "Carolyn, please stop. Just please stop. Stop this. Please stop." She's like, "Shut up, Regine. Those children are mine." So she calls me and Denise over to her side of the bed, and she was over next to the wall. Her side of the bed was, and there's this little walking space between her and the wall, so you could walk, single file there. And she calls me and she's like, "Come over to your mother." So we walk over there, and she has this talk with us. Mommy loves you, don't you? And we're like 8, 9 years old. Your mother loves you, don't you? "Yes, Mom, we know." "Well, I'm going to show you how much I love you." And Dad the entire time's like, "Carolyn, please stop, please stop." So Mom's like, "I'm going to show you and Denise how much I love you." So I take the front, I'm like, hell, keep my sister away, so she's protected. So I'm like, I'm closest to Mom. So she used to smoke these Moore cigarettes, these long menthol brown cigarettes. So she was smoking this Moore cigarette. She's like, "I'm going to show you how much I love you." So she holds her arm out, and she takes the cigarette, puffs it up really big, and pretends to burn herself with it. And when I say pretends, this is a woman who, holding the cigarette a good 2 inches away from her arm. You could see that she was not burning herself, but here she is, screaming, crying, acting like it's burning her. Dad's like, "Carolyn, please stop." And she's acting like it's burning her. And it's not. And then she gets through. It's like, "Oh, you see how much I love you." And I'm sitting there again, thoughts of a child. You're supposed to burn yourself to show me how much you love me, but you're not burning yourself. So what the fuck, Mom? Of course, I'm not saying that. You don't say that shit to Mom. It's like, "Yes, Mommy." And you walk out. That's Mom. It got to the point, like I said, Denise ended up, she told me that when we re-recorded a couple of years ago, she told me that she got to the point when she was a child, I guess in high school, that she tries to commit suicide. And certainly during college, she became a drinker. She doesn't do that now. She's still got a lot of anger now. But what happened was, the way it manifested in me was, first, we were in Florida, and it got to the point that I would catch my parents gone, and I would urinate in the floor. That's right. I became a carpet pisser. So I would, and it took me decades to be able to talk about that. And what happens is once I began this legal journey of mine of trying to become a better individual, I was talking about it on stage during a cybersecurity conference. I talked about this shit. Hey, I would used to piss the floor, and it's the first time I shared it with anybody, anywhere. And that's one of the things this show that I do today, I talk about it being therapy, and it is therapy for me. I'm able to share and talk about things on this show in front of an audience that I can't share with friends or family members because it's embarrassing. It's a hell of a thing to have to admit shit like this. So I'm on a stage admitting that I used to urinate the floor. And after the presentation, this woman comes up to me and she was like, hey, I just wanted you to know that I used to, before the job I'm doing now, I used to work with abused children. And what you went through and what you did is not uncommon. You did that because that was the only form of control that you had in your environment. So I'm like, that's the first place it manifests. The next place it manifests, my mom, like I said, my mom leaves my dad. And I ended up, and I've talked about this before, but my dad was in Florida, me and my sister and my mom, we were in Hazard, Kentucky. And I was always under the impression I was going to be, my sister made the comment once that she always thought someone was going to come and save us. And my response to it, my immediate response was, I knew no one ever would. And I really think that's that's how our lives diverged at that point. She always expected someone to come in and rescue me and her. And when they didn't, and when they never did, she just got more and more angry. Me, I realized that was never going to happen. So I took the proactive response, that life of crime. If you're going to do it, you do it yourself. No one's going to save you but you. And I still to this day believe that. I don't wait on God to do it. I don't wait on all these other things. I realized that I was very fortunate. I was given the opportunity to turn my life around through outside people helping me that I can never return. But I still have that mentality today. If something's going to get done, you do it yourself. You don't wait on somebody to do it for you. You do it yourself. What happened was I guess at one point I thought maybe I was going to get rescued. And my dad gets married. I thought I was going to move down to Florida with him. My dad gets married, and basically that shit gets shot in the head. That same day, I walked into an elevator in the hospital. A lady walked in that looked like my mom, and I just popped. I assaulted this lady, not sexually, but physically assaulted this lady, beat the hell out of her in an elevator, and served. I was arrested, served 6 months in solitary because they didn't have a juvenile holding facility in Perry County, Kentucky at that point. Got out, and I didn't plead guilty. I took it to trial. Judge found me guilty of assault. He sentenced me to time served plus a psychiatric evaluation. Spent I think it was 4 or 6 weeks at a facility up in Louisville, Kentucky. Got cut loose and was supposed to see a counselor after that, which that never happened because, again, you're in Eastern Kentucky. You don't have, back then, it may be different now, but back then you didn't have access to those types of facilities to see a counselor to get the counseling treatment that you needed. So I've had that, I've talked about that on Lex Friedman. I've talked about that on stage, on some other interviews as well. I rationally, I know why it happened, and I can sit there and say why it happened, and rationally, I can talk about that. At a completely different emotional level, I'm the guy who did that, and that I've lived with that guilt and thought about that every single day since I was 15 years old when I did that. Rationally, I can say, well, I was a child, I was a victim of abuse. This is what happened because of that, and you can start to realize that. But on a completely more visceral, emotional, personal level, I was the person who did that. So yeah, that's a hell of a way to talk about your childhood. As I said, that internet godfather, that's not where my life of crime began. 15, I did that, got out of that, got sent back home. I didn't meet my first decent human being until I was late 16. When I got cut loose out of that trouble from the assault, I was in Whitesburg, Kentucky. I did my freshman and sophomore years in high school there. And of course, I was considered the complete piece of shit, rightfully so. We moved from Whitesburg, Kentucky to Perry County, Kentucky, the Hazard area. And my sister, there were 3 high schools. There was MC Napier, there was Hazard High School, and then there was Dills Combs High School. We lived within half mile of MC Napier. So of course the idea was that everybody would go there. Well, we load up and go day one, and we're not allowed in, or at least I'm not allowed in. And I was not allowed in Hazard High School as either because of that assault. And I ended up going to Dills Combs High School, where I met the first decent individual in my life. And that person, and when I say that, I want you to understand that my dad was not in my life. My dad's family, they were good people, but they just were not there. My grandmother, my father's mom, she had passed away when I was young. She was a very good person. But then it was just this echo chamber of just this illicit bad activity, this bad upbringing, because my dad wasn't there, nobody else was there. So the first real decent individual that I met was when I went to Dills Combs High, and that was the only school I could go to. And I walked into the homeroom, and there is Carol Combs, this English teacher. She was my English teacher for my junior and senior years. She also ran the academic team, ran the drama department, everything else. And she takes me in under her wing. She became this surrogate mother to me. She was my mom, and she was a very healthy individual. At the same time, she had this helper. His name was Robert Campbell, and he was like a surrogate father to me. They were outstanding human beings, and I flourished under them. I became the head of the academic team. I was head of the speech, drama. I won best actor and actress in the state while I was there. I really excelled, and everyone knew what I had done, that I had hurt this lady. And I can't imagine what her family went through because of my actions, and I still can't imagine that they. And to say that I'm remorseful doesn't really put it into proper context or words about the guilt that I feel and the remorse over my actions. So I go to high school there. I do pretty well. And actually, I do better than pretty well. Leaving high school, I got voted, they do that the accolades or whatever it is. Superlatives, that's what they're called. And I won every single superlative except for best physique and best body, best physique and best looking. That's what it was. Yeah, because I got that face for radio. So, and I had scholarships coming out in theater and debate, things like that. I had these scholarships. I turned them all down because they finally got me a girlfriend. And I guess scared to leave the area as well because of that upbringing. When you've got a parent like that to my mom, me and Denise were property. We were her children as property, not because of being these human beings that were loved. We were loved because she owned us. And if we ever stepped outside of that, did something where that ownership was not always apparent, things went south pretty quickly. My sister, for example, she gets a scholarship at Berea College, one of the top colleges in the United States. She goes there because it's a free college. She didn't have to pay for it. So she goes there working through a degree. My mom finds out that my sister has a boyfriend. And Denise, my mom, loads up, gets in the car, drives to Berea College, walks in the president's office, and proceeds to tell the president this story of, hey, my sister is on drugs. My daughter, Denise, is on drugs. Not only is she on drugs, but she's got this boyfriend who's actually a pimp who's pimping her out. So she makes up this entire lie to try to get Denise thrown out of school. And Denise is almost thrown out of school. The only thing that saved her is 2 members of the alumni actually had met my mother and knew that she was this manipulative, crazy bitch. And they tell the president this. The president then starts questioning my mom, and my mom goes off the handle on it, goes crazy on him. So the result was as Denise didn't get thrown out of school. My first real girlfriend was when I was 19 years old. Preacher's daughter, outstanding person. Her family was great and everything else. And my mom finds out I've got a girlfriend, and she starts terrorizing the family, saying they're devil worshipers, that their daughter's a whore, and would call them all hours of the day and the night to try to break up that relationship. And that was very common. I had an issue where I was, like I said, I was in theater going through the drama. I came out of high school, one of the top actors in the state, very talented overall. And I got a scholarship at Fresno State. The guy who wrote Three Ninjas, his name is Edward Emanuel. He came in, he saw me, he offered me a full ride scholarship. I took it, and he disappears, comes back 2 weeks later, pulls into the driveway. I'm out shooting basketball with some friends of mine. I walk up to his car, and I'm like, "Hey, man, I'll walk you in so you can meet the family." He's like, "I'll be fine. I'll just go on up." And I was like, "Okay." He goes inside. About 20 minutes later, he comes out, he's white as a sheet, gets in the car, never says a word to me, drives off, and I don't hear from him again. It takes me a couple of weeks to find out what happened. And what happened was his mom gets him in there, and she pulls a knife on him, tells him that he's not going to steal her goddamn son, that she'll gut him from gizzard to asshole. And she meant it. So, of course, he leaves. And I guess that kind of broke my spirit more than anything at that point. Stay in, see what happens. And what happened was I got more and more involved in types of scams and hustles and frauds that not only my mother, but that entire side of the family were engaged in. So, charity fraud, insurance fraud, forging documents, illegally strip mining coal, trafficking drugs, growing marijuana, breaking and entering, you name it. I was involved in it until I branched off on my own. The relationship with the preacher's daughter lasted for 5 years, and then it goes south because she figures out, hey, Brett Johnson is not a Jesus boy. He's not going. He may go to church with me every Sunday, but he is not a believer. He has some definite issues with faith, or as I like to call it, the Langston Hughes problem. Langston's got a poem where he talks about being in a revival, and he keeps waiting to see baby Jesus, and baby Jesus never appears. So he just doesn't go up to the front to get saved. And I had that same issue. I have massive problems with faith, the Langston Hughes issues. My first girlfriend, Christy, I guess she realized that. She breaks up with me. I then meet this other girl and get married to her within 6 months. I fake a car accident to get the insurance money to get married and move from Hazard, Kentucky to Lexington, Kentucky to go to UK. Go Wildcats. And again, I told you guys that I get the worst parts from my mom and my dad. From my mom, I get that criminal mindset. From my dad, I get that fear of being abandoned, of the people that I love leaving me. And I got married, and I've never been able to show love. It's always been very difficult for me to show love in some sort of healthy way. So, I got married, and I told my wife, because I'm a Kentucky guy. All right. I believe it's the man's job to provide for the house. And I know that may fly in the face of a lot of women out there. I'm sorry. It's the way I was raised. Not going to change that shit. That's just the way I am. And I do it in an unhealthy way a lot. Told my first wife, I was like, hey, look, don't worry about getting a job. Just go to school. Worry about getting your ass in school. Then, no, don't worry about the cooking and the cleaning. I'll do that shit too. So here I am, 60-hour-week job, 18-hour class load, all the cooking, all the cleaning. Something had to give. What gave was the job. Well, with that proclivity toward fraud, got to figure out some way to make money. So I start doing these little scams around town, charity fraud. I worked for a company called the Lexington Diners Club that gave us discount diners club for restaurants. Stole a whole shitload of them, got in trouble for that. Set up my own fake charity, got in trouble for that, and was petering around doing that bullshit until I finally find eBay. And man, I liked eBay. I mean, I really liked eBay. Didn't know how to make money on eBay. But fortunately, Bill O'Reilly, an Inside Edition, gave me a lot of inspiration to start my life as a cyber criminal. This one show, Inside Edition, for those who don't know, that right-wing guy, Bill O'Reilly, who got his ass in trouble and thrown off Fox Network, he used to host this show called Inside Edition, this 30-minute news tabloid show. The one show they had that I was really tuned into, they were talking about Beanie Babies, and they were profiling. Now, those who may not remember, Beanie Babies, mid to late 90s, high dollar collectible. I mean, high dollar collectible. People were buying these damn things instead of investing in stocks and bonds. The one they were profiling on the show was called Peanut the Royal Blue Elephant, selling for $1,500. I'm sitting there watching it like, shit, I need to find me a Peanut. Skip class the next day, go around to all the Hallmark stores looking for Peanut, figure out pretty quickly, idiot, he's not in the Hallmark stores. His ass is on eBay for $1,500. But they did have these little gray Beanie Baby elephants, these little gray ones for $8. Buy a gray Beanie Baby elephant for $8. Stop by Kroger on the way home, pick up a pack of blue RIT dye, go home, try to dye the little guy. Now, look, I did not do very well in home economics class. Turns out those damn things are made out of polyester. They don't hold the dye very well. Get them out of the bath, look like they've got the mange. But I ripped a lady off of $1,500. Found a picture of a real one online, posted it. She thought I had the damn thing. She wins the bid. And right there is where social engineering kicks in. All right. So what you see with most cyber criminals is that, especially as people like me, we become social engineers as children in order to survive and navigate that environment when we're kids. Those adults are toxic. They're dangerous. We have to know what the hell they're thinking. We have to try to survive that. So we become social engineers as children and then use those tools acquired as kids. We use them when we're adults to victimize other people. So right there, when she wins that bid for that Beanie Baby, social engineering kicks in. I want to make sure that I put her on the defensive, not me. So she wins the bid. I immediately send her a message. Hey, lady, yeah, congratulations on the bid. Hey, yeah, congratulations, you won. But look, we've never done any business before. I don't even know if I can trust you. So what I need you to do, is you go down to the United States Postal Service. Yeah, that's right, the post office. You go down to the post office, get a couple of money orders for $1,500. That's right, 2 money orders totaling $1,500. Look, it's issued by the United States government. Protects you, protects me. You send me those money orders. As soon as I get them, I'll send you your animal. Now, she believed that. So she sends me the money orders. I get them, cash them out, send them the creature in the mail. She gets this fake Beanie Baby. Immediately, I get a phone call. This is not what I ordered. My response, lady, you ordered a blue elephant. I sent you a blue-ish elephant. And right there is the first lesson of cybercrime. That lesson is, if you delay a victim long enough, if you just keep putting them off, a lot of them get so exasperated, they throw their hands in the air, walk away, and you never hear from them again. And guess what? None of them complain to law enforcement. And that is still the lesson today, the first lesson of cybercrime. Now, that was my first crime, my first online crime. Very unsophisticated, did it under my own name, but I got away with it. And when I got away with it, I kept going. I got better at that craft. I started to understand the dynamics. There was a point where I sold autographed baseballs. That's how my wife found out I was a criminal. I was married to my wife for 9 years, lied to her all 9, took her 2 to 3 years to find out I was this crook. And the way she found out, I was watching Inside Edition again. They had a show on autographed baseballs. Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire. I was watching that like, shit, I need to get me some baseballs. Skip school the next day, go down to a sports store, buy a case of baseballs. Stop by Kroger again, buy a black Sharpie, go home, start signing Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. Notice that, hey, those signatures look like shit. So it comes to me like, probably need to create my own certificate of authenticity to go with it. So I print out a shitload of certificates of authenticity, put them all on eBay, sell them all for $60 a pop. That prompted a knock at the door because, again, I did that under my own name. Had not really gotten smart enough yet. So one night we're sitting there and we were living off campus. It's like 7 o'clock at night and you get that cop knock at the door. Bang, 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 bang. And you know it's a cop. You know immediately it's a cop. So I got up, answered the door, and there is Sergeant Pat Tingle and some detective from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. And he looks at me, he's like, "Are you Brett Johnson?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Can we come in? We'd like to ask you some questions about some baseballs." And I'm like, "Sure, guys, come in." Well, my first wife, Susan, she's not saying a word. She's stood up by this point, and she's not even looking at the cops. She's looking dead at me. So the cops, the entire time they're talking to me, she just looks at me. And I'm like, okay, that's a little odd. So they're talking to me. She's like, Tingle's doing the talking. He's like, "Hey, autographed baseballs." I'm like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire." "Yes, sir." "Where'd you get them?" "Bought them off eBay." "With certificates of authenticity?" "Yes, sir, with certificates of authenticity." "Mr. Johnson, we've got samples of Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa's signatures down at the station, and it don't look nothing like what you're selling." And I'm like, well, that's funny. I mean, it comes with certificates of authenticity. "Mr. Johnson, we think that you signed those baseballs." "No, sir, I did not." "And we think that you printed out those certificates of authenticity." "No, sir, I did not. Bought them off eBay." "Mr. Johnson, you're going to send these people their money back, or we're going to put you in jail. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir, I certainly understand. Have a good day, Mr. Johnson." So they walk out. Susan, the entire fucking time, she's just looking dead at me. Finally, I look over at her, and I'm like, "What?" And she looks at me, and she's like, "You son of a bitch. That's why you had all those goddamn baseballs." And I'm like, "Yeah." So that's when she finds out I'm a crook. So that's this length of crime. There's another thing where I go into Kinko's and they were selling front page like 98, or not selling. They had a kiosk of trial versions of front page 98, and I had a little program that would turn it into the full version, an exploit that would turn it into the full version. So I posted them all on eBay as the full versions of front page 98. So I go into Kinko's one night, like at 2 a.m. in the morning, look at the guy behind the counter. And I was like, "Hey man, can I take a few of these, trial versions of 98? And he's like, "Man, take as many as you want." And I paused and I looked at him and I was like, "You sure? As many as I want?" He's like, "Man, you can take as many of those things as you want." So I pick up the entire kiosk, walk out the door with it. That prompted another knock at the door. But it got to, and I kept going. I never got in trouble. I had a few knocks at the doors. And what I found out is the people who didn't complain, you don't have to send their money back. And the people that did complain, oftentimes you didn't have to send their money back as well. You just keep putting them off, and they disappeared after a while. Back to that first lesson of cybercrime that I spoke about. Well, I got to the point that I was selling pirated software. Pirated software led into installing mod chips into first gaming systems, PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn, and then finally into cable television boxes. So you can put a mod chip into the box, turn on all the pay-per-view, all the porn, all the wrestling matches, all the boxing and movie channels and everything else. So started doing that, and that finally led into programming satellite DSS cards, those 18-inch RCA satellite systems. You can pull the card out of it, program it, turn on all the channels. I started doing that at about the same time that a Canadian judge ruled that it was legal for Canadian citizens to pirate those signals. And he said this shit in court. What he says is he was like, since RCA, they don't sell the systems up here. Since they don't sell the systems up here, it's legal for my citizens to pirate those signals. Well, what happens is, because of that idiot saying that shit, overnight in the United States, a little cottage industry pops up. You go down to Best Buy, buy the system for $100, take it out in the parking lot, open it up, pull the system out, pull the card out, throw the system away, program the card, ship it to Canada, $500 a pop. Started doing that. making a lot of money, had so many orders, I could not fill them all. Thought to myself, why do I need to fill any of them? They're in Canada. I'm down here. Who are they going to complain to? It's illegal. So I didn't fill any of the orders, stole even more money, got worried about how much was coming in. At that point, I was stealing about $4,000 a week through PayPal payments, stuff like that. Got worried about how much was coming in. Figured the best thing that I could do was get a fake driver's license, open up a bank account, launder the money through that, cash out at the ATM. Had no idea where to get a fake ID. So I got online, looked around, thought I found a guy, sent him $200, sent him my picture. He rips me off. Yeah. Yeah, he rips me off. And I laugh about it today, but man, back then was I pissed. I was so pissed that the result was shadowcrew.com. So if you look at organized cybercrime, and all cybercrime is always organized, right? So if you look at organized cybercrime, there are three sites. There's Counterfeit Library, Shadow Crew, and Carter Planet. I ran both Counterfeit Library and Shadow Crew. Carter Planet was started by this gentleman by the name of Dmitry Golubov, a Ukrainian national. He saw the success that I was having with Counterfeit Library. He was a spammer, and he had this idea. As a spammer, he was getting all these credit card details, and he had this bright idea of, I wonder if people would buy stolen credit card details. Well, it turns out they will. So he picks up the phone, he calls his buddies, they call their buddies. They end up having a physical conference in Odessa. 150 of these cyber criminals show up, and they launch Carter Planet, the genesis of all modern credit card theft as we know it today. Shadow Crew and Counterfeit Library, what they did, see, before those two specific sites, the only avenue you had to commit some sort of online organized crime, and again, it's all organized, and I'll get into why, but the only avenue you had to do that was an IRC chat session, this internet relay chat, this rolling chat board where you had no idea who you were talking to, if they knew what they were talking about, if you could trust them, if you could learn from them, if they had a product or service, if the product or service, if it worked, if it existed, or if they were just going to try to rip you off because everyone there was a crook. Shadow Crew specifically solved that problem. Shadow Crew gave a trust mechanism that criminals could use. Now you had a large communication channel in the form of a forum type structure where individuals from different time zones could reference conversations days, weeks, months old. They could engage in those conversations, learn from those conversations, take part in those conversations. You knew by looking at someone's screen name what the skill level of that person was, what they were good at, if you could trust them, network with them, work together, whatever you wanted to do. We had vouching systems in place, review systems in place, escrow systems in place, all with the singular purpose of establishing trust with one criminal and another when those criminals would never know each other's real name, not know what each other looked like, and never meet each other in real life. Now, that's important because there are three necessities to successfully committing online crime. Those three necessities are gathering the data, committing the crime, and then cashing out. All three of those necessities have to work in conjunction. If they don't, the crime fails. The problem with that is that a single criminal, one guy, can't do all three things. He can do one thing, sometimes two, rarely all three. And the reason for that is either there's a skill gap. That criminal simply doesn't know how to do one of those things. Maybe it's a man-in-the-middle attack. Maybe it's building skimmers or ransomware or whatever that is, or launching a phishing attack. There's a skill gap. He can't do one of those things. Or there's a problem with geographic location. That criminal is simply in an area where he cannot fulfill one of those three necessities. Typically, the cashing out aspect. For example, the Ukrainians, Script, Dmitry Golubov, Roman Vega, all those guys, they were in the Ukraine. They had all the data in the world. They knew how to commit the crimes, but they had committed so much fraud at that point that every single card in the area, in that eastern bloc of Europe, was shut down. If you were a legitimate card holder, you still couldn't cash your card out because everything was shut down because of the amount of fraud. So they had to get outside money mules to be able to cash out, to put money in pocket, and then split the profit with them. That's why, looking at cybercrime these days, I'm the son of a bitch that partners, that brings the Ukrainians over and has that little detente. We get together and work together, and that's where all these credit problems and modern day cybercrime, as we know it today, starts to explode. That's one of the reasons I'm called the original internet godfather, because of being able to develop, refine, implement these crimes, being able to bring all these criminals from different countries, everything else together to work in an open source environment, sharing and exchanging information, collaborating together to find new targets, develop new crimes, and profit as criminals. That's this original internet godfather that's talking to you today. So Shadow Crew, trust mechanism. It was also a marketplace of criminal activities. So you could buy anything you wanted to there. The only things that we had off limits, we did not deal in drugs, counterfeit currency, or child pornography. And at the end of the day, we started dealing drugs and we started dealing in counterfeit currency. The only thing we never trafficked in was pornography. We didn't do that at all. Shadow Crew goes on to make the front cover of Forbes, August 2004. Headline, Who's Stealing Your Identity? October 26, 2004, United States Secret Service, they arrest 33 people, 6 countries, 6 hours. Some of the people that I was associated with. The guy in the suit, that is David Appleyard. He's a retired mortgage broker. Listen to that. He's a retired mortgage broker. He gave up brokering mortgages because he had a taste for the illicit side of life. He ends up 5 years in prison. The guy with the flag behind him, that is Dmitry Golubov. If you've ever wondered where modern credit card theft begins, it's with him. As I mentioned, he was a spammer. He gets this idea. I wonder if people would buy stolen credit card details. And that launches CarterPlanet.com, the genesis of all modern credit card theft as we know it today. Now, Dmitry is arrested. I was arrested February 8th of 2005. Dmitry is arrested mid-year of 2005, spends 6 weeks in a Ukrainian jail, at which point a politician comes out and says, he's a really good guy. We should release him. So they let him out. He fights extradition. He beats extradition. He goes on to start his own political party called the Internet Party of the Ukraine. And because he has a sense of humor, its platform is to stomp out fraud. He's currently on parliament in the Ukraine, stands a chance of being one of the next presidents if Vlad Putin doesn't kill him first. Personally, I'm opting for that. The guy with the 3 pictures, that is Roman Vega. I'm not sure how many people out there know what a credit card dump is, but on the back of your credit or debit card, that magnetic stripe, there are 3 data tracks on there. The first data track is the customer's name. Second data track is the card number / 16-digit algorithm out the side of that. Third data track is called indiscriminate data. No one uses it. Now, what's bought and sold on criminal forums is the second data track, the dump. Here's what happens. Typically, you buy 10 of these things as a criminal. You buy 10, you encode all 10 track 2s on 10 counterfeit cards. Track 1 you create in just one name. So whatever that name is, then you get one fake ID to match the names on all 10 cards, okay? When you go to shop, you insert the card, swipe the card. The only information that's sent out for verification is the second data track. The first data track, that customer's name, shows up on the cashier's terminal in front of them. That way, in case you're ever asked for verification. Track 2 sent off for verification. Track 1 shows up, customer's name, you're asked for ID, you pull out the fake ID, you show it, everyone's nice, warm, fuzzy, you walk away with your laptop, camera, whatever the hell you want to buy. Back then, those things sold for around $30 a piece. Today, those things sell for about $30 a piece. Roman is arrested. I think he got 17 years in prison. The guy in the other suit with the goatee, the crypto king himself, Omar Donati. He was a money launderer on Shadow Crew, gets arrested, serves 4 years in prison, gets cut loose, changes his name to Michael Patron, partners with another Shadow Crew operative by the name of Gerald Cotton. They go on to start a cryptocurrency exchange in Canada called Quadriga. Gerald Cotton travels to India, where he mysteriously dies. When he mysteriously dies, $236 million worth of cryptocurrency vanishes into thin air. Turns out that the area of India where Gerald Cotton supposedly died is known for faking deaths. Who would have known a part of this world was known for that shit? But that's the part of the world known for that shit. Also turns out that before Gerald Cotton traveled to India, he had registered similar fake domains to a mortuary in India and also a police station in that part of India as well. Michael Patron was not charged with anything. You would think that would be the end of Michael Patron. However, it's not. Just a couple of months ago, another cryptocurrency scheme comes to light. This token called Wonderland Time. It was discovered that Michael Patron was the chief financial officer of Wonderland Time. That token goes from being worth over $10,000 a piece to now it's under $100 each. Patron walks away. He's in Thailand. Last word that I heard, he's currently in Thailand. His Ether wallet, before crypto winter hit, his Ether wallet was about $50 million was the value of it. The guy with the guy that you see there, that's me. That's me. I get 7.5 years in prison. Moving right along, the guy with the goatee started out as our forum techie, goes on to be the largest credit card thief in history, 170 million credit card numbers. Albert Gonzalez is that guy's name. He gets not one, but two 20-year prison sentences. The guy in the orange, Max Butler, he's in the book Kingpin by Kevin Poulsen. I'm in that book as well. 60 million credit cards. Now he's released now, but his release was delayed. Well, Brett, why was it delayed? Don't worry, I'll tell you why it was delayed. It was delayed because he was indicted while serving time in prison. What did he do? I'll tell you what he did. What he does is he gets a cell phone in prison. No, they do not sell those on the commissary. Where he got it from a guard. You see that $40 prepaid smartphone you buy at Walmart? That sells for $1,000 behind the fence. So he gives some guard $1,000 to get him a cell phone. He gets a cell phone, gets on the dark web, gets stolen credit card details, uses some of the stolen credit card details to fund his buddy's commissary accounts, uses one of the stolen credit cards to buy a drone, uses the drone to have more drugs, phones, and contraband delivered inside of the prison. Needless to say, they find out about that. Needless to say, they ain't none too happy. And needless to say, his release was delayed. Brings us to the guy in the black and white, Maxim, a Turkish national. He worked on the Heartland Payment Systems breach with Albert Gonzalez. He's arrested with Albert Gonzalez. They got him at the airport in Istanbul. They got his laptop. On his laptop, he had TrueCrypt. The entire thing was encrypted. They looked at him and they said, hey, we need the key to that. He was like, I'm not giving you the key to that. They looked at him and said, that is fine. We have a place for you. So they throw him in a Turkish jail for 11 days, at which point he promptly gives them the key, at which point they give him 30 years. 30 years in a Turkish jail. Now, I'm not sure how many people have seen Midnight Express, but I'm not even sure that dude is still alive, which brings us to this kid. This kid. Now, look, I do not use the word hacker in my interviews, in my presentations, because we are not hackers. We are criminals. But if there's ever been a hacker, it's this kid. His name is Jonathan James. As a minor, he broke into the DOD, broke into Pentagon, broke into NASA, and shut the NASA computers down for 6 weeks. As a kid, once he gets out of that trouble, he decides he wants to try his hand at credit card theft. He partners with Albert Gonzalez. He's arrested with Albert Gonzalez. Now, whether true or not, and I'm going to tell you, I think it was true. He thinks that law enforcement is going to lay the blame of those breaches at his doorstep. He was the only competent man in the room. So what does he do? He gets up one day. He walks into his dad's bedroom. He gets out the .45, walks into the bathroom, writes a note, steps in the shower, and he blows his brains out. And that's the end of Jonathan James. Now, those guys, there's a couple of things that are going on. The first is that it's important to realize that no one who is ever involved in cybercrime ever comes to a good end. It's certainly true that most individuals will probably never be arrested, but you lead a life of deceit. You don't have friends, you have associates, you're always in fear and paranoia. It is a miserable existence where you end up hurting every single person in your life. You hurt people that you know, you hurt people that you don't know. You just become a despicable human being that really has no thoughts or concerns for anyone else but yourself. If you're lucky, you end up with 7.5 years, like me. If you're not, you end up with 2 20-year prison sentences, you end up with a bullet in the head, or you end up like the owner of Evolution Market that decides he's going to exit scam and steal everyone's money. $24 million. No one knew who it was. About 1.5 years later, they find the guy on a beach in Cyprus without his head and hands. Turns out some of the money he'd stolen was from the Ukrainian mob. They took exception to that. And they had a message: don't steal from us again. That's what happens. The other reason I show you these pictures is no one there was wearing a hoodie. No one's 400 pounds in their mom's basement screaming, "Mom, you said, would you cut the crusts off?" with the Matrix background flowing in the back. That is not what a cyber criminal looks like. We have this perception. You got 7,500 security companies out there. You got the media. You got all these groups that try to paint cyber criminals as these upper tier computer hackers able to break into any type of computer system they want to. Like, yes, no. Those types of attackers are out there, but their numbers are extremely small. The 98, 99%, they're just very good social engineers. They know what it takes to manipulate you into giving up information, access, data, or cash. All those pictures I showed you, cash. Me, cash. Cash. Motivations, you want to know why people break the law online? It's status, it's cash, or it's ideology. Status. Can I impress my criminal peers? If I can, that equates to respect, and that respect equates to more profit at the end of the day. Ideology. Do you have a different political belief than me? Have you pissed me off? If so, I may try to get your ass. Do you think that people could be attacked because they have a different ideological belief? If you don't think that, where have you been the past 3 to 4 years? Most of it, though, cash. All those pictures, cash. Me, cash. I like to say with me it's not cash, but it's still cash. It's still cash. It's what I can do with it, right? Because I'm the guy who buys love. And I'm not talking about strippers and escorts. I mean, I did that. I'm talking about the people who were important to me, the people that I loved. It was never enough for me to just try to show love in a healthy way. I always went overboard, and typically that overboard was some sort of expensive crap. This is what my love is worth. I said I was married for 9 years. For 9 years, I lied to my wife every single day of those 9 years. It took her 3 years to find out I was a criminal. The next 6 years were me saying, I've stopped, I'm going to stop, I will stop just a little while longer, until finally it got to the point of me saying, well, you like spending the money, don't you? She figured out, took her 9 years, but she figured out that I wasn't about to stop. So she leaves me. And that fear that I have of being abandoned became real. Yes, I caused it. I absolutely caused it. But that doesn't make it any less real. I was in Charleston, South Carolina at that point. Susan leaves me, and I was walking around just crying every day, depressed, and I realized that I was getting suicidal. Figured I needed to do something about that, so I grabbed the phone book, go to the Yellow Pages, look up psychology, look up criminal psychology, because I figured I needed that shit. Call the psychologist in the middle of the day crying, tell her everything. She's like, come in now. So I go in, and I saw her for, 4 or 5 months, told her everything, and she was trying to get me to quit breaking the law, and she was trying to get me to stop breaking the law and to go into real estate. And my question was, is there a difference? But I think she did some good. And what happened with me is I got lonely. And I won't lie, I got horny too. I was 34. I had never been to a strip club. So I figured, why not start? And I'm the guy, I walk into the strip club, and I am that dude that falls in love with the first stripper that he sees. And up until I did the Lex Friedman show, I had always joked about that because it was a very painful, that entire part of my life is a very painful thing to go through again. So I walked into a strip club, and I'd never been to a strip club before. I had no idea what the hell was going on. I'm very naive when it comes to love, much like my father. Very naive, very hopeful. So I walked in, and this girl, I go to the bar and I get a drink. This lady walks up to me and she's like, well, will you buy me a drink? Well, I was like, sure. Well, those drinks are $25 a pop if you're buying them for strippers. I was like, okay. So we sit there and drink. Hers is not alcoholic at all. And I didn't know at the time, but a lot of people go to strip clubs because it's kind of therapy. Those men, you may dance, but they're really just wanting to talk. And I was one of those talkers. So this lady's name, her name was Elizabeth. And we started talking, and she's like, well, we can go back in the back if you want to buy a bottle of champagne. So I was like, well, shit, how much is a bottle of champagne? And how long do I get back there with you? She's like, well, until the bottle's gone. I was like, okay, a couple hours anyway, let's do that. So $400 for a bottle of Corbel. We go back there and we talk. That's all we do is we talk the entire night. And of course, she's been trained to size me up and ask, where I live, what kind of car I'm driving, and notices the watch I'm wearing and everything else. And again, I'm not an idiot. I know that's what's going on, but still, it's a very pleasant conversation. And I convinced myself that there was a connection, and looking back now, there was a connection. So that night's talking, I leave at the end of that bottle, walk back in the next week, call her off to the side, and I was like, hey, look, I really liked spending some time with you the other night. I would like to take you out to dinner if you'd like to go on a date, so we might be able to see if we, how we get along and everything. And she looks at me and she's like, okay. And she tells me this place called Rue de Jean down in downtown Charleston. And I went back and I told my buddy, and he's like, well, bring your wallet. And I was like, you think? And he's like, man, bring your wallet. You're going to need it. I'm like, okay. So we start dating. And again, my problem was I've never been able to show, I've always had trouble showing what love is in a healthy way. And it's always been gifts. And when you start dating a stripper, they're not shy about telling you what the fuck they want. So, 3 weeks in, I'm buying her this Jimmy Choo purse for $2,500. And it goes from there. But I end up, I moved her in with me. And she wouldn't come home. She would go to work. She only worked like 3-4 days a week. So she would go to work, and typically I would get a call somewhere around 8 to 10 o'clock in the morning coming to get me, because she wasn't able to drive home, or she would just come in very late in the morning or not come home at all that night. And, I approached her with it, and she's like, yeah, we just, have a few drinks afterwards. I was like, okay. Well, that continues on until one morning she's like, come and get me. And I flew mad. So I came and got her, brought her back to my house, tucked her into bed. And I had never been through a woman's purse before. And I was like, well, by God, there's a first time for everything. I'm going to find out what's going on. And, go through her purse and find Coke and, the straws. I used little half cut off straws. I'd never seen Coke in my life before till that point. And it broke my heart. And I'm the guy that I never leave well enough alone. And I'm always able to find out the information I want to find out. And sometimes you're better off probably not knowing. So I got online, and, there are some forums that talk about strip clubs and the extras that you can get there and what the girls do and everything. So I started visiting these forums. Found her and found out that she was prostituting herself to support her cocaine habit. And it broke my heart. It literally broke my heart. So found all that out in just a matter of hours while she was asleep. And so I walked in, as she's waking up, I walked in, told her that found the Coke and everything. And she's like, well, it's not a problem. I didn't mention that I'd found out that other information. Just couldn't do it. But I get it in my head that whatever it takes to see her out of that is what I'm going to do, whatever it takes. That's one of those famous last words. And I think that's part of the criminal mindset too, is, whatever it takes, I'm going to do whatever it takes. So I cut off all my friends, and it took some time. It finally took me having this ultimatum of, if you can't give up the drugs, don't come back. And that when I gave her that ultimatum, finally, after a few more weeks, gave her that. After that, I came home. What happened was she called me one morning at 10 o'clock. She was completely out of it. I'd take her and I'd written a note, left it on the bed, tucked her in the bed. And as I tucked her in, I was like, hey, when you wake up, you got this letter. I'm going to Columbia, South Carolina for the day. So I took me a drive and was gone for several hours and come back that night. And when I came back, she had quit her job. And from that point on, she didn't use any more drugs at all. She drank heavily, but I guess that was the supplement for that. Try to get over the one. But truth of the matter is I love the girl. I did. I absolutely love that woman. And for a long time, I was not able to really talk about that at all. And the first time I talked about that was the Lex Friedman show. First time I was able to talk about that and be truthful about that. And the truth of the matter is she loved me too. Now here's what's important to understand. Even though people might love each other, that does not mean that you're always good for each other. Oh yeah, you can love somebody. That don't mean that you're healthy for them and that you're not toxic around each other. And I think that both of us, she was much more advanced than I was about overcoming her addictions and her demons and everything else like that. I was a criminal and that was my addiction. And I've said it before in another show and I'll say it here again. When you're addicted to something, the addiction comes first. You will put that addiction above relationships, friends, family, love, everything else. And I certainly did that. So I think that we were both toxic for each other. My understanding is today that she is a very healthy person. She's very happy in her life and everything else. And I am nothing but absolutely thrilled about that. I truly am. But, there's a part of me that wishes that things would have worked out, but there was no possible way that it could have. All right. But that's the story of that. But the reason I bring that up, other than it being that start of the downfall of me hitting rock bottom, is my sister disowns me. See, I got engaged to Elizabeth. I kept investing more and more, thinking everything was going to work out as I was going broke the entire time. That idea of I'm going to do whatever it takes. Well, what I got in my head is whatever she wants that's going to keep her mind off drugs is exactly what the hell I'm going to do. Well, that caused me to go absolutely bankrupt. All my money was offshore. I had a nest egg in the United States that was going to last until tax season started up. See, I'm the son of a bitch. I've got a whole shitload of firsts in cybercrime. All these things I did and started that laid the platform of cybercrime as we know it today. Well, one of those things was tax return identity theft. I'm the son of a bitch that invented that. The reason that your tax return is delayed every single day, this idiot right here. I was stealing $160,000 a week, typically 10 months out of the year, laundering the money over to Bank Latico and Estonia. When I was arrested, as a matter of fact, I was arrested February 8th, 2005. My last seizure notice was January of 2010. So yeah, they were crawling up my ass for years, getting all the money that they could. But I'm the guy that starts that. Now, I go broke because I'd sent everything over to Estonia. Shadow Crew makes the front cover of Forbes and they get busted. I go through my stateside cash. At the same time, I'm with Elizabeth and I can't really take these trips that I need to in order to get more cash up and everything else. So I start running counterfeit cashier's checks, get popped running those. I get arrested. Elizabeth had no idea what the hell I was doing. She, like I said, she had expensive taste. She wanted a Tiffany engagement ring, so I stole that with a counterfeit cashier's check. Then she wanted Tiffany wedding bands, and that's where I get arrested, is with a controlled delivery on that. She didn't know what I was doing. She didn't know I was a criminal. She thought my joke that I told my friends and her and everything else was, I'm a crime consultant. I just didn't tell them on which side of the criminal equation I was on. So I got arrested. She finds out I'm a criminal. I was arrested by the FBI and the Charleston County Police Department on a controlled delivery. About 30 people in the parking lot is what got me. But within 45 to 60 minutes, the Secret Service come in, they take over the investigation. What actually happens is this FBI agent by the name of Cynthia McCants, she was the arresting agent on that. They bring me into this interrogation room. 45 minutes into that, two Secret Service agents walk into the interrogation room. They slide this paper across at me and they say, hey, we want to talk to you about some stolen credit cards. And that's when things go really south all of a sudden. They let me sit in a county jail for about 10 days. Two more Secret Service agents, they fly in from New Jersey, because that's where all these investigations were starting from. And what gets Shadow Crew popped was my forum techie, Albert Gonzalez. He was cashing out at an ATM. We had this thing called the CVV1 hack. It turns out that we were spamming all these card numbers and pins. It was very easy to encode those cards because none of the banks had implemented what was called the hash. So all you needed to encode track 2, which you had to have the track 2 to take to an ATM, the only thing you needed was the card number. If you had the pin, you could put any number outside that card number, it would encode, you could cash it out. We were stealing about, a user would steal about $40,000 a day on that type of fraud. Albert was in New Jersey one day, broad daylight, wearing a disguise, this woman's wig, and he's feeding one counterfeit debit card in after another, pulling 20s out, putting them in a backpack, stands at an ATM for 40 minutes. Meanwhile, 2 New Jersey cops just happened to be across the street, noticed this kid doing that. After 40 minutes of that, one cop looks at the other and says, I think I'll go ask what he's doing. So he walks up on Albert. Albert falls apart at that point in time, gets arrested, goes to work for the Secret Service. Nobody told us at Shadow Crew. What saved me was I was doing tax return identity theft, stealing all this stuff. We had a shitload of people helping us and working with us, and a shitload of connections. One of our connections was this guy named Enhance, who had been the, many people may not remember it, but Paris Hilton, back in the early 2000s, she had her T-Mobile phone contact list published on the internet. That was us. That same guy that did that also hacked into Secret Service text messages about them investigating us. So I had access to that. We started to see IP numbers of law enforcement agencies, everything else. I was the head of Shadow Crew. I got worried about RICO. So I figured, hey, it's time for me to quit. So I quit right as Albert Gonzalez is arrested and goes to work for the Secret Service. Because I was able to avoid all of that, I was not arrested on the Shadow Crew bust. They picked me up 4 months later, and they gave me a job. And I'm the guy that continues to break the law from inside Secret Service offices for the next 10 months until they find out about it. You see, what happens is they let me sit there. They fly in from New Jersey after the initial arrest. They pull me out of the cell. They look at me and they said, hey, we got your laptop. And I'm like, yeah. And they said, you got anything on your laptop? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, you're going to be charged for it. And I'm like, yeah, I figured. And then they look at me and they said, is there anything you could do for us? Well, I was arrested 3 weeks before I was supposed to be married to Elizabeth. And I was bug shit crazy about her. I loved the shit out of that woman. So my exact words were, you let me get back with my fiance and I will do whatever you want me to do. Little did I know that, hey, Brett, even though you both may not know it, that relationship is way the fuck over, man. And I mean, the Secret Service agents knew it and everything else. Well, they let me sit. They said, we're going to get you out. They let me sit in the county jail for 3 months, lower the bond, get me out, and I go to work for them. It takes a month for me to get moved up to Columbia, South Carolina. I'm working in their big war room. They've got me on a laptop hooked up to an outside line, plasma monitor connected to it, 50-inch plasma monitor on the wall so they can watch everything I'm doing. They've got Camtasia and Spectre Pro that's doing all the keystroke recording, and it's taking snapshots of the screen like every 10 seconds, all right? Meanwhile, there are 2 Secret Service agents in the room with me with a SLED officer, South Carolina law enforcement. They've got them in the room, 3 people, all times, monitoring me, making sure everything is kosher that's going on. For the first 2 weeks in my job, I go in there 4 to 6 hours a day. My job for the first, my job is to go in 4 to 6 hours a day and just surf the web, find targets, set up those targets to be arrested, and teach these agents about how cybercrime goes on. And they have these different people come and talk to me. They have ICE come and talk to me. They have Bank of America come and talk to me, everything else, so they can try to understand the way cyber criminals operate, because, hey, I'm that guy. But what happens is they get bored after a couple weeks. And because they're bored, because it's boring as shit watching somebody surf the web as fast as I friggin' surf it and do this job. So they get bored and they start watching porn. They typically go to this site called Flash Your Rack, where these women show their tits and then you rank them from a 1 to 10 on a scale. And they would spend their 4 hours doing that. So I'm sitting there, and at the same time, this one agent, and I'm going to tell you, the agents were outstanding people, but they did not understand the cybercrime mentality. And they certainly did not understand my motivations. The most important thing to me was not staying out of jail. The most important thing to me was not doing the right thing. The most important thing to me was that woman that I was in love with, that I wanted to save that relationship, and I would, quote unquote, do whatever it takes to do that. Well, to me, because of that fucking mentality that I've got, it meant continuing on with the expenditures. Hey, just money is what I need. So I started stealing money. They're sitting there lambasting me over that. You know, she's a whore, she's this, she's that. And I'm sitting there going, fuck, I don't need to listen to you guys. And they're sitting there saying at the end of the day, well, you're going to go back to prison. Well, I get tired of that. And the truth is that with a regular type of informant, that shit might work. With the cybercrime mentality, that shit don't work. You're going to get somebody like me that's like, I'll show you what I can do. So I start breaking law inside of the Secret Service offices with them in the room with me. I realized pretty quickly, hey, all this information that they're recording, it's going on a DVD every night. They're not going to parse through it and try to capture that data and see what the hell I've done. Oh, that's fine. As a matter of fact, they had made the comment that for discovery, for anybody that they arrested, they were just going to give them the whole spindle of DVDs and let them find the information. I'm like, shit. So if they're going to do that, they're damn sure not going to know what I'm doing. So I start breaking the law from inside Secret Service offices. Of course, my relationship with Elizabeth absolutely falls apart because that was damaged beyond any type of ability to save it. So, and once that became apparent, is when I truly spiraled. Right there, I used to. Once that ended, I would go to a strip club. I'd typically go in there with a pocket full of 20s. I would hand the pocket full of 20s to the bartender, and I would tell the bartender, hey, however many kamikazes those would buy. And that was what I called my stripper magnet. They'd put these tables together and they'd load the tables up with shots of kamikazes. And strippers would come over every night, and we'd just drink until 2-3 o'clock, and then I would go home with or she would go home with me, whatever stripper wanted to that night. And it just spiraled out of control. And I got to the point, you adopt. One of the things I found in prison with cyber criminals and drug dealers and everything else is oftentimes the end's coming. And you adopt this philosophy of fatalism that whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And that allows you to continue the criminal activity without having to be concerned about the consequences of those actions. So that's what happened. Secret Service, I ended up setting up, it's not just, I talked about the Netflix show, this guy named Daniel Rigmaden that I taught him how to do. It was during the time with the Secret Service, I taught him how to do tax return identity theft. And there was a big discussion about that because I was the only son of a bitch that knew how to do it. Secret Service found out I knew how to do it, and they didn't know if they could use that as a way to entice criminals in. So Daniel contacts me, and I walk him through how to do the crime, set him up on it, how to do it, send him debit cards on him so he can do it. And then they identify the son of a bitch and then arrest him from there. So taught him how to do it and then set him up to do it. And evidently that is not entrapment. I don't know how the hell it's not, but it's not. But another individual that I set up was a guy named Sean Mims out in Los Angeles. He was an actor. Taught him how to do tax return fraud, and he was a friend of mine, as close as a friend as you can get at being a criminal. But we knew each other's real names, and we would call each other and everything else like that, share gifts, all that. And he got identified. I didn't mean for him to be identified because I told him if I ever disappeared not to contact me again. Well, I disappeared for about 3 months when I was in jail. They let me out. And the day that I get back online, he contacts me right as the Secret Service is looking over my shoulder. And they identified him within a matter of days. Well, what happens is they were set to do a nationwide roundup of criminals called Operation Rolling Stone. So they go to arrest Sean in Los Angeles. They arrest the guy. The apartment manager comes out and says, hey, don't know what's going on, but Sean, the night before, there was a U-Haul here, and he loaded up a whole shitload of stuff right in the middle of the night and took out. Well, when they raided his apartment, there was absolutely no evidence whatsoever of any crime being committed by Mr. Mims. So they come back to me and they said, hey, we need you to take a polygraph test. Make sure you didn't tell this son of a bitch anything. And my response was, I ain't taking no polygraph, to which they were mighty disappointed. They told me to call my lawyer, and I was like, I'll call my damn lawyer. And I told my lawyer, I was like, I don't want to take a polygraph. My lawyer's like, did you do anything? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, look, he said, you don't have to take the polygraph. And I was like, good. He's like, but if you don't take the polygraph, they're going to violate your release, your bond, and you'll go back to jail. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And he's like, well, you could try to take the polygraph and test and pass it. And I was like, fine. So I go back in. I was like, I'll take the polygraph. They asked 3 questions. The questions were hey, have you contacted the press? Well, I had been contacting the press. This New York Times writer named Tom Zeller had been flying back and forth from New York for months to interview me. So yes, I failed that one. Then they asked, had I accessed a computer outside of the offices, which I had. And then they asked, had I contacted and warned anybody about investigations? And I failed all 3 questions. They violated my probation. Now, they wanted to search my apartment. And I told them, hey, you can absolutely search the apartment. Just make sure I go with you. And they were fine with that. So the 2 agents that searched my apartment, I was as close to friends with them as you could be. They thought they were my friends, and I was manipulating them the entire time. And again, that social engineering, I've talked about that before. You need to know the pressure points. How can you manipulate someone when you need to do that? And you build it up the entire time. You know, you're waiting for that one moment when you need to manipulate this person to do what you need them to do. Well, I knew from their, behavior when they were supposed to be watching me or watching women, what happens is they walk in the apartment. I had shit in the apartment and I knew where it was. One agent decides he's going to search the kitchen, search the living room. The other agent's going to go in the bedroom where I've got my shit hidden and stashed. And it was not hidden very well. So as he walks in, I'm like, hey, man, you want to see my porn stash? And he's like, oh, you watch porn, man? I was like, yeah, man, you want to see what I got? And he's like, yeah, man, show me what you got. So that distracts that agent from finding anything that was of consequence. Later on, after they violate the probation and send me back to jail, they do a more thorough search of the apartment and find all this shit. And because those 2 agents did not do an initial thorough search and find the items, they ended up losing their jobs as Secret Service agents. And they had to go to, and when you lose your job working for the government, you don't get fired per se, you just get transferred to a different agency. So one of them's over at the Veterans Administration. I don't know where the other one is now. But truth of the matter is they were good men. They just didn't understand the mindset. They thought that, they thought I was their friend, and I screwed them over. And I regret that daily. I would do that because they certainly tried to give me the ability to turn my life around, and I was just not open to that at that point in time. So they violate my probation, send me back to the county jail down in Charleston, South Carolina. Let me sit there a week. A week later, 2 agents pop in. Bobby Lee Kirby, he pops in. Bobby Joe Kirby, Bobby Kirby. He pops in with Jim Ramacone. Jim Ramacone's the number 2 in South Carolina. They pop in, they pull me out of a cell. Jim Ramacone, he's got the Miranda waivers because he want me to, I'm supposed to talk. And Bobby, he's sitting there dejected because he knows I've screwed him over for months at this point in time. Jim's got the Miranda waiver. He's got his hand on it. I'm sitting on the desk across from him. He looks at me. He's like, now, before I give this to you, I just want to say something. You're going to tell me every single thing you've done the past 6 years, or I'm going to make it my mission in life to fuck over you and your family. And not just talking about this case. Once you get done and out of prison, I'll fuck you over the rest of your life. Then he gets this big smile on his face, passes the Miranda waiver over to me. He looks at me, says, leans forward. He's like, now you want to talk to me? And my exact words were, I looked at him and I said, I don't want to talk to you. I want a lawyer. His face gets red. He pops up. He bangs out the door, and on the way out, he says, fuck you very much, Bobby Joe, in tow. Well, what happens is I was only under a state indictment at that time for, I don't know, I was like 70 felonies total. State indicted. The feds had not indicted me yet. 2 weeks later, the judge rules that they had violated my bond improperly. He reinstates the bond. I walk my ass out of the Charleston County Detention Center. Nobody calls the Secret Service to tell them I get out. My mom's there to pick me up. I look at my mom and I was like, look, if they're going to fuck me, they're going to have to find me. I call this stripper chick that I'd given like $60,000 to. And I was like, Kim, I need some money. I need $1,000. And she's like, well, I don't know if I've got it. And I was like, you should have it. You got 60 fucking K. So I meet her in a Lowe's parking lot in Augusta, Georgia, get $1,000 from her, tell her I'll pay her back 3 in 2 weeks, take off on I-20, no friggin' clue where I'm going to go, get to Dallas, realize that there is a prepaid debit card supplier in Dallas. So I walk in, social engineer that guy into giving me 67 prepaid debit cards without me showing ID or paying for them. And I start back committing tax fraud with the idea that I'm going to commit enough fraud to bug out to Brazil. Florianopolis, Brazil is where I wanted to go, and set up shop again and commit a crime again. Still $600,000 in the space of 4 months. Wake up one morning the night before I'd stolen $160,000 from ATMs. Wake up the next morning, sign on to cartersmarket.com, which was ran by Max Butler, and I was an admin on the site. He just didn't know I was an admin on the site. Sign into cartersmarket.com. There's my name, U.S. Most Wanted, beside of it. First time that I had ever had my real name or my picture posted on any criminal forum ever. And it was all about how I had screwed over the Secret Service and how I had been setting up the guys on these criminal forums. So every link and assistance that I might need, the Secret Service was very good about making sure that that was cut off. And so I sat there. I was in Las Vegas. I guess it was like 7 o'clock in the morning. And I sat there just staring at it for a while, knowing that, by God, I was in the shit now. Finally, I sat there and I said it out loud. I was like, well, Mr. Johnson, you've made the United States Most Wanted list. What do you do now? And the next words out of my mouth were, I'm going to Disney World. So I loaded up. I had a Jeep Cherokee, loaded up the Jeep Cherokee and drove from Las Vegas to Orlando, Florida. Rented a timeshare for paid cash for 9 months in advance. Went down to a furniture store, bought $30,000 worth of furniture to furnish the timeshare. Bought another $30,000 in electronics. Had a DVD collection that had previously been seized that was worth, I think, 25 or 30K. Went and bought that DVD collection back again, only for them to seize it again, and set up shop. Got my tickets to Universal Parks and to Disney World. And every day I went to the parks, and my plan was to sit there for about a year, let things calm down, and then try to get the passport, bug out to Brazil at that point. I lasted about 6 weeks. Secret Service, I was September 16th, 2006. September 16th, 2006. I'm asleep one day. I'd had a long night partying. I hear this knock at the door, and I was used to, because they were still building the complex, I was used to the builders coming by and asking if everything was still working all right, if everything was going okay. So I hear this knock at the door. I get up, walk to the front door, look out the peephole. Nobody's there. I'm like, huh. Open the door, step out into the hallway, walking down the hall, 2 South Carolina Secret Service agents and an Orange County Sheriff's officer. They turn around, and I'm like, hey, guys, how are you? They're like, well, Brett, we're fine. How are you? And I'm like, I'm fine. Would you guys like to come in? And they're like, yeah, but let's put you in cuffs first. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of figured. So they put me in cuffs, walk in. Bobby's there, and he's like, you got anything in the bedroom? And I was like, yeah, Bobby, I got $150,000 cash in the bedroom. He's like, okay. And I said, and I got an AK-47. And his face turns white. He's like, you've got a weapon? And I was like, no, I'm just kidding with you. So they throw me in the Orange County jail. And right there is probably one of the best turning points of my life. What happens is there's this guy there named Yeti. He's in for meth. They had federal holding in Orange County, so all the Fed inmates are held for, pretrial and everything. So there's this guy named Yeti that's in there for meth. He looks at me and he takes me in under his wing, and he's like, Brett, the only time you get off in federal prison is the drug program. And I'm like, Yeti, I don't have a drug problem. And he's like, well, Brett, you can find a drug problem, can't you? And I'm like, Yeti, I think I can find a drug problem. So they give me this thing called diesel therapy because I had pissed them all off. And diesel therapy is they load you up in a van, and the trip was from Orlando to Columbia, South Carolina. Took about 2.5 weeks to get there because they stopped at all these county jails along the way. They let you go through the 6 to 8 hours of processing to get to your bunk. Then you get to the bunk and they tell you, hey, time to go. And they load you up again. Wears you out mentally, emotionally, physically, everything else. At every one of those county jails, I told them on processing, hey, yeah, I have a drug problem. I use cocaine and alcohol, a lot of it. So by the time I get to Columbia, South Carolina, I've got this paperwork trail of me saying I've got a drug problem and requesting help for that. My lawyer, my first lawyer, was this guy named Paul Thurman, Strom Thurman's son. I had paid for him with illegal funds, so they make me drop him and they give me a public pretender. And this guy looked exactly like Billy D. Williams from the movie Nighthawks or a malt liquor commercial, whichever Billy D. you want to take. He looked exactly like that. The only thing this guy does, the only good thing he does, is he gets the judge to order a psychological evaluation for me. So the psychological evaluation, it's 4 to 6 hours. They come to the jail. Psychologist pulls me out of the jail. About halfway through the interview, he looks at me. He's like, so do you use any type of drugs? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, what do you use? Cocaine. Smoke or snort? Snort. How much? An 8-ball a day. And he looks at me and I look at him and he's like, that's a lot. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you have any trouble out of that? And I was like, yeah, I can't get an erection. And he looks at me and I look at him, and I had gotten that from watching the movie Boogie Nights, that end shot where Mark Wahlberg, he's got that third leg that just won't stand to attention. I'm like, shit, that's got to be right. So I'm sitting there looking at the psychologist. He's looking at me, and I'm finally, I broke the ice, and I'm like, is that right? And he was like, it could happen. Is it still going on? I was like, no, it's not. Not that I need it rising up where I am right now. And he was like, okay. So that makes it into my PSR, the pre-sentence report. The probation office and the prosecutor, they do this in-depth background check on a federal inmate for sentencing to tell the judge how much time the judge needs to give the asshole he's about to sentence to prison. So that drug shit makes it into my PSR. So the day of sentencing, my guidelines were 60 to 75 months. I had told everybody in the unit that, hey, if they sentence me to any more than 60 months, I am not staying. I'm going to free myself. So the day of sentencing, prosecutor's there, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs, Mr. Johnson has manipulated the prosecutor, he's manipulated the Secret Service, and he's manipulating you today, Your Honor, and we insist on the upper limits of the guidelines. The judge, she looks at me, and she's like, I agree. 75 months. I'm like, huh. I looked at my lawyer and I was like, can you get the drug program for me? He was like, I don't know. I'll ask. He stands up. Your Honor, will you order the drug program for Mr. Johnson? Judge goes, no, but I'll recommend he gets evaluated for it. And I'm like, I looked at my lawyer and I was like, what does that mean? And he was like, well, you're probably not going to get the drug program. My next thing was, well, how soon can you get me to the camp? And he was like, well, I can get you there pretty quick if you don't want to appeal. My exact words were, fuck the appeal. Get me to the camp. I'll take it from there. He looks at me like I'm the biggest idiot in the fucking world. 6 weeks later, I arrive at Ashland, Kentucky minimum security federal prison. Now, I had family members and friends search out a prison that wasn't supposed to have a fence around it, pull up to Ashland. It's got a 14-foot fence, razor wire on top. And I'm like, I can't climb that shit. Go in during processing, ask the guard, are there any jobs outside of the fence? Guard's like, well, you can work in the national forest. And I'm like, no, I'll die out there. Then he's like, well, you could do landscaping. And I'm like, huh, I can run a weed eater. So 4 or 5 days later, I walk into the landscaping office, talk to the guard that runs it. Behind his desk, the entire wall is this blown up aerial photo of the compound and the outlying areas. So I can literally sit there, talk to the cop, and plot my escape the entire time. While this is going on, my dad starts to visit. I hadn't really had a conversation with my dad in over 20 years. He shows up at the sentencing, stands up, and the man meant it. I didn't know it at the time, but the man meant it. The man stands up in front of the judge, and he's like, Your Honor, I want to make sure that Brett, my son, gets a good start when he gets out of prison. He can come and live with me so I know that everything is going to be all right. He starts to visit me in prison. About the third visit in, Dad looks at me and he's like, I've been reading about you online. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, that's a lot of money you made. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you think you can teach somebody how to do that? And I'm like, now I used to, when I first started to tell this story, I lied. And I said that I thought that my dad was back in my life. And it turned out he was just wanting to use me. That was an absolute lie. Looking back now, I think that my dad, because of the relationship he had with my mom, and it had been so long since he had been able to talk to me or anything else, he was still seeing me through that lens of my mother and that criminal activity. So I think that's really the only way he thought he could talk with me, talking to shit. I'd like to learn how to do that. Well, I manipulated the man into helping me escape in return for teaching him how to do that type of fraud. And he only had $4,000 cash to his name at that point in time. He gave me the $4,000. I had him drop off a change of clothes, a cell phone, and a not a fake driver's license, a driver's license. The only one he had was my real one at that point in time. And I escaped. I lasted about 6 weeks at the landscaping office, worked like a dog. They had me out there at one point with a broom sweeping a mountainside just to have some shit to do. And I was the guy that would volunteer for every shit detail. Worked my ass off until 6 weeks were up. Then I escaped. Lasted about, I lasted 3 to 4 weeks on the escape. I made it, I think about 230, 240 miles away is where I made it. Meanwhile, the U.S. Marshal's Office, they're canvassing a 3-state area until they find me holed up at a hotel. They arrested me. At the time they arrested me, I had a laptop, had prepaid debit cards, and had more stolen identity information because I was certainly about to do this shit again. So I do. They send me to a county jail in Rowan County, Moorhead, Kentucky. I'm there, 4 or 5 months is where I'm there until I'm sentenced on the escape. On the sentence on the escape, they use the exact, because the escape happened so soon after the initial sentencing on the real charges, those 39 felonies I pled guilty to. The escape happened so soon after that, they used the exact same pre-sentence report. This time I'm not in South Carolina. I'm in Kentucky, a different judge. People at the sentencing, me, me, prosecutor, Secret Service, judge. Prosecutor stands up. Your Honor, we'd like you to consider that when Mr. Johnson was arrested, it looks like he was engaged in identity theft once again. Judge looks at the prosecutor. No, I'm not going to consider that. If you were going to charge him with that, you should have charged him with that. See, the problem is when the marshals arrested me, they came in and they took that stuff without a warrant. So they weren't allowed to use that as any evidence at all. The prosecutor thought that they would be cute and just throw that shit in to try to get me more time. Judge says no. Judge looks at me. Judge says, Mr. Johnson, don't know why you did this stuff, but it looks like by you keeping your mouth shut right now, you're saving yourself a very serious charge. And I said, yes, Your Honor. Then he looks at me and he's opening the PSR and he's reading through it. And he says, it also looks like before you were involved with all these drugs that you were a pretty good citizen. And I'm like, yes, Your Honor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sentence you to an additional 15 months in prison for the escape. I'm like, okay, but I'm also going to order the drug program for you. So here's what the drug program does. It gives you a year off in federal prison, and it gives you an additional 6 months of halfway house time. So you're out 18 months before you would usually be out if you take the drug program. So by escaping prison, I was able to get the drug program and get out of prison 3 months earlier than what I would have had I not escaped. Nothing to be proud of. What the benefit of that is that I was ordered for the drug program, which turns out it's not about drug rehab. It's 9 months of cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, I ended up doing 8 months solitary confinement. 8 months solitary confinement. And let me tell you, that shit is not fun. You end up seeing stuff after a while. They ain't got no bugs. They got nothing else. You see bugs that don't exist, all this other bullshit. You try to sleep, 18 hours a day. You finally run out of the ability to sleep. So then you've got to do the rest of your time just, doing your fucking time. So then they send me out to a real prison out in Big Spring, Texas, out in West Texas, where literally it is so hot that warnings come on the radio telling you what streets not to drive on because the streets are melted. That's right, melted streets. So they're like, hey, try to escape from that. And that's when I find out what a real prison is. That guards don't run prisons, inmates run prisons. You're met at the door by whatever race you are. So I'm out through processing. It's a converted Air Force compound. They turned this old Air Force compound into a prison. I met at the barracks by the treasurer of the Aryan Brotherhood, a guy named Nick Sandifer. He looks at me. He's like, hey, man, how many more white guys came in? I'm like, shit, I don't know, 4 or 5. Next question is, what are you in here for? My answer with a big smile on my face, computer crime. He looks at me like I'm the biggest piece of shit on the planet. Turns out that when you say computer crime back then, that didn't mean credit card theft, hacking, all this other bullshit. When you said computer crime, that meant you were a pedophile who got arrested for child pornography. So he goes and gets all of his big guys to circle around, and they're like, what'd you say you're in here for? So I'm sitting there trying to tell them, hey, this is what's happened. And they're like, that's a really good story, but you still said computer crime. So for the first month, they think I'm a pedophile. But here's the thing. Until they know for sure, they won't nail your ass. And that meant the guards had to tell them. The guards didn't tell them shit. So for the first month, they think I am, but I'm not attacked because they don't know for sure. At the end of the first month, it's okay because Wired Magazine hits the compound. It's got a story about Max Butler. You remember him, the drone guy, 60 million credit cards in the book Kingpin. He first made his appearance in Wired Magazine. I'm in the story too, and it's talking about all the credit cards and all this other bullshit that's going on. And then I'm thinking everything's fine. And then all of a sudden, it's got this one line that says Brett Johnson, comma, Secret Service informant. And I'm like, oh, shit. Oh, so you ain't a pedophile. You just a snitch. Yeah. So the warden shuts down the entire compound. They call me in the next morning. Warden's got all the SIS guys, all the counselors in his office. He looks at me as I walked in. He's like, did you give an interview to Wired Magazine? And I'm like, yeah. Don't you know they will kill you here? And I'm like, no. And then he's like, do you feel safe? And I'm like, well, if you tell them you don't feel safe, they throw you back in solitary confinement for another 8 months until they can ship your ass someplace. So I'm like, hey, yeah, man, I feel completely safe. And he was like, look, we're going to do a locker search, try to get all the magazines out. If anyone says anything to you, you had better come and tell us because they will kill you here. Do you understand? I'm like, yes, sir, I understand. Get the fuck out. So I go back to my bunk. They do a locker search, try to confiscate all the magazines. They can't. The next day I walk into the unit. There's Nick Sandifer laying on his bunk. He's got the magazine wide open, reading it. And I'm like, oh, shit. Walked up to Nick and I'm like, hey, Nick, what are you doing? Oh, just doing some reading. Anything interesting? It's getting there. Let me save you the trouble. Take the magazine, point the line out to him. He's like, man, I already knew. I was like, are we going to have a problem? He's like, well, did you snitch on anybody that's here right now? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, until someone gets here, you told on, we don't have a problem. And I'm like, good. He's like, but I need you to do something for me. And I'm like, so it turns out in federal prison, everyone has to have a job. Doesn't matter what you do, you got to have a job. I got a job in education teaching a book literature class. Wednesdays, 6 to 8:30 p.m. Every Aryan on the planet signed up for this lit class. At the same time, a couple of counselors used to attend to it too. Now, did we teach literature Wednesdays, 6 to 8:30 p.m.? No, we did not. We taught fraud every Wednesday, 6 to 8:30 p.m. Help me help you. I'm here to help you guys. And that's how I wasn't beaten while in prison. At the same time, I became, as has been referred to in the comment section on the Brett Johnson Show, I became the liaison for the pedophiles and the Aryans. So any white guy that stepped off the bus that looked suspect, and yes, you can tell who the pedophiles are as soon as they step off the prison bus. So any one of those that stepped off the bus, it was my job to walk up to them and have a conversation. And the conversation went like this. Hey, I don't know what you're in here for. I don't care what you're in here for. But if you're in here on some sort of fucked up charge, you need to tell me, because you see those guys over there. If you don't tell me and then they start talking to you and befriend you and find out later you're in here for something screwed up, they will kill you. Now, what do you want to do? And at that point, most of them would say, man, I just want to do my time. And that way I would go back to the Aryans and I would say, look, this is a guy you don't want to talk to. And at that point, he wasn't allowed to watch television. He wasn't allowed to work out on the yard. There were things, and if they wanted to extort him, they would. And that's the way prison is. And I didn't have to join the gang. They knew I wasn't philosophically or ideologically aligned to them or any shit like that. It was just, I had value, and that was my job. So that's what I did. Nothing to be proud of. So I got out, and I got the drug program. It got to the point that I started to teach game theory. This counselor took me in under his wing while I was there. So I legitimately started to teach game theory as a class and public speaking as a class. And the counselor was happy enough that he was able to make sure that I got transferred out to another prison in time to hit the drug program. And the drug program was a 9-month class at Fort Worth Federal Prison. It was a 9-month class that taught cognitive behavioral therapy, that your thoughts determine your feelings determine your actions. And if you can change your thought process, your feelings and ultimately your actions will change as well, that you accept responsibility for your actions, that you're grateful for the things that are given to you, that you have humbleness and empathy and all these other traits that typically a lot of prisoners don't have. It teaches you to do that and to be accountable of things. And it is a life-changing thing. I'm very grateful that I went through that. Very, very grateful. And I still adhere to those traits and those qualities and try to attain that every single day. All right. While I was at Big Spring, we went through my incarceration period, went through 3 riots, saw 2 people murdered, 4 suicides. The riots, the racial riots, the first one you go through, you are scared to death. Absolutely scared to death because you've never been through that before. You got the Ninja Turtles, you got the tear gas, you got all this other bullshit that's going on. Scared to death. Second riot, you start to notice, hey, looks to me like this is the Hispanics and the African Americans. This ain't the white guys that are rioting. So you realize it's a race riot. So by the third riot, you're literally laying in your bunk, just letting it go. They're beating the hell out of each other. You're just laying there. Somebody runs up to you, ask if that's your locker. You say no. They break into it. You say yes. They say they leave you alone. You go from there and you let it go. And that's the way prison life is. First murder I saw, we're walking the track, and it's like a flock of birds. It's a third of a mile track, I think is what the length of the track was. You walk counterclockwise. So we're walking the track after dinner, after chow. And you see the inmates from the top of the key start to migrate down like a flock of birds. You look in the distance, and one inmate's got another inmate down. He's got him by the head, just bam, 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 killing him, driving his head into the concrete. And it takes guards about 15 minutes to get out there because, hey, they don't mess with that shit. They don't want to get hurt. So they shut the compound down for a few days, and about 3 days into it, they line all the inmates up into 2 lines. You walk into this little room, and they ask you 2 questions. The first question is, hey, did you see anything? And the answer is no. Next question is, if you would have seen anything, would you tell us? And the answer is no. Then they look at you and say, get the fuck out. And you leave, and that's the end of the investigation. That's what happens. That's prison. The suicides, typically hangings. One guy, the worst one I ever saw, was in the county jail. We were under 23-hour lockdown, got out during that hour. There was a guard in the pod with us. This black kid, he had broken the window on a bicycle shop. His bond was like $600. He didn't have money to pay for it, so he had been sitting his ass there until trial, and he was not handling his time well at all. So he gets up while we're out during that hour, walks upstairs, steps over the banister, jumps, bam, lands. We're like, damn, we think he's dead. The guard, he's got the button on his hip, and he's not hitting it because he's in shock, and everybody thinks the kid's dead. We're just sitting there looking at him like just shocked and stunned. Finally, the kid starts to move. Stands up. The guard's like, holy shit. Kid stands up, starts walking back toward the stairs again. And you can hear the guard start to say, no, no, no. And we're just like, what the hell, man? Kid walks back up the steps over the banister again. You hear the guard, no, no, no. Kid jumps again, lands on his fucking head, and doesn't get up from that. That may be the worst thing I ever saw right there. Between that and murder, I don't know. I mean, there was some bad shit that went on. I make the joke that prison is basically like kindergarten, except you've got some 3rd and 4th graders with knives. And that at times that is the way it is. But at times it is a horrible environment. At times it's an environment like maybe some sort of sitcom or something like that. At times it's you have inmates there that that look out for each other, that are true friends with each other, and try to help each other as best they possibly can. I mean, it's just a variety of different feelings and situations and environments all rolled up into one, and you become used to that. So I got out in 2011, no taste of breaking the law whatsoever. Could not find a job. I had job offers from Deloitte, from KnowBe4, from a couple of payment processors. Could not take them because that's a computer. I was under 3 years probation. Could not touch a computer. Got to where I was trying to apply for fast food. Turns out that cash register is a computer. Can't touch it, can't take the job. Okay, what about a waiter's position? Waiter? Well, that's credit cards and computers, idiot. So I couldn't take that either. So I was bumming money from my dad and my sister. I had a roommate that was taking care of half the rent. I was on food stamps so that I could eat. And they tell you when you leave prison, hey, get yourself a job, get yourself something you care about, and you may not recidivate. Well, you couldn't find a job. And what I cared about, I had a cat. Monster was its name. I had a cat, and I had enough money to feed my cat, and I didn't have the money to buy toilet paper. So my first crime when I got out, took about 1.5 years to get to that point. My first crime, went to the dollar store, got the cat some food. On the way out, they had this kiosk there with toilet paper, and I ended up shoplifting toilet paper because I didn't want to go back into online crime. And I'm lucky. I'm lucky that what happens is about the same time, my wife, Michelle, she finds me. I didn't find her. She finds me. So I ended up moving in with her. I mean, I had been dating the same type of woman I had been dating. It's like I had a sign, I'm ready to go back to prison whenever you guys are ready to send me. And Michelle finds me. I ended up moving in with her within a couple of months because I was absolutely going broke. I didn't have money to pay the rent or eat or anything else. And she was very kind. I ended up moving in with her within a couple of months. We didn't get married. And I finally get a job. And the job that I got, there was a guy on Craigslist advertising for landscaping. Yeah, like that comes around, bites me in the ass again. He was advertising for landscaping. So I called him up. I was in Crestview, Florida. He was in Destin, Florida, about a 35-minute drive. And he was like, yeah, come on, come down and talk to me. Well, him and his brother were running the business out of their house. So about 20 minutes into the conversation, he looks at me and he was like, his name was Dustin Doremus. He looks at me, he's like, hey, can I ask you a question? I was like, yeah. And he's like, are you on the run or something? And I'm like, no, why do you ask? He's like, well, you just don't seem to be the type of person that would do this kind of work. So I told him everything, told him who I was and what I'd done in the prison time and all that. And he looks at me and he's like, man, he said, I'm going to have to think about that. He said, go back home and I'll give you a call over the weekend. Well, that was a Friday. Sunday evening, he calls and he asked one question. He's like, Brett, if I give you a job, are you actually going to work? And I said, Dustin, if you'll just hire me, I'll work my ass off, man. So he's like, show up tomorrow morning at 6:30. So I show up 6:30, and my job was to push a manual lawnmower 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, $400 a week. And I busted my ass doing that. And I got to tell you, I'm not the guy that does manual labor. Even when I was escaping, I didn't really run. I just kind of walked quickly. But I busted my ass, and I was happy to do it. I'd mow those yards for 10 hours a day, come home, pass out, wake up the next morning, take a shower, hit it again. But I was doing something, I was doing something. I was damn proud of the work that I was doing because I was contributing. It was very good. The problem is when it gets cold, the grass doesn't grow and the job is not needed. And that reason that I commit crime pops up again. I got to show her I'm worth it. She's the only one working. I've got to show her that I'm worth it in this relationship. So I get it in my head that, hey, if nothing else, I can bring food in the house. So I get on the dark web, get some stolen credit card details, start ordering food. And it becomes like this perverted form of Maslow's hierarchy of needs because it's never just that. So I start buying food. And I'm like, well, the kids need clothes. Well, I need clothes. Well, you got Christmas coming up. Well, hell, what else can I get? So it goes further and further. And I get caught on a food order, controlled delivery. That should be a nice little tidbit for any criminals out there watching this shit. You got to watch out for that controlled delivery shit. That's right. They know where you're going to be and what time you're going to be there. So I get caught on a controlled delivery. Michelle had no idea what I was doing for a living, that I was committing crime. Had no clue. I've been lying to her the entire time. At my sentencing on that violation, the only people there are the judge, the prosecutor, the probation officer, a couple of U.S. Marshals, me, and Michelle. Michelle stands up in front of the judge. She tells the judge that I'm a better dad to her kids than their father is. I'm sitting there crying. Probation officer stands up and he's like, we think Brett is a good guy. We think this is a one-time thing. Prosecutor says the same thing. Judge gives me 12 months, 1 year. Probation officer stands back up and he's like, Your Honor, if you can give Mr. Johnson a year and a day, he can get the good time and he can get back to his family. Prosecutor agrees with that. Judge amends the sentence to a year and a day, so I only have to do 10 months instead of 12 months. So I go back to Texas and I do my time. And that's when I find out I learned that lesson of Michelle didn't need me for what I could give her. She just needed me for me. And I'd had that with my sister, but I'd never had that with any relationship before. So I get out after 10 months. They kill probation. I get married shortly after I get out, within 2 months after I get out. They killed probation so I can touch a computer, but I still can't get a job because I'm the guy that steals everything. And they tell you when you leave prison, hey, if nothing else, you can sell cars. No, you can't. You can sell cars if you're a drug dealer. If you're the guy that does computer crime and steals identities and credit cards and all that, no, you can't. And I know what my triggers are. Even to this day, I know what my triggers are. Back then, I knew I'd go so far before I did it again. So I told Michelle, I was like, let me see what I can do. I signed up for LinkedIn of all the damn things. Signed up to LinkedIn. I reached out to this guy, this FBI agent by the name of Keith Malarski. He works out of the Pittsburgh office. He's retired now, been retired a few years. But I sent him a message. He was an agent at the time. I sent him a message. I was like, hey, man, think the work you did. He was involved in a lot of the arrest with me and everything. I was like, I think the work you did was outstanding. I've got nothing but respect for you. By the way, I'd like to be legal. And this agent responds within 2 hours, takes me under his wing, gives me references, gives me advice. He's retired, like I said, but he still does that to this day. To this day, the man still does. And I'm going to tell you guys this. Because of my sister disowning me, she disowned me for a while. And because of Elizabeth, she disowned me. Because of my wife, Michelle, and then finally because of the FBI. If I didn't have those things, there's not a doubt in my mind that I'd be back in prison for 20 years. For 20 years. And it goes even further than that. Once Malarski gave me those references and advice, because of the industry reaching out and being willing to hire me and help me and listen to me and help me take this journey of using this knowledge that I've got as a lifetime criminal to do good, because of that is why I am in the position that I am in today. And what position is that? Well, I've got the Brett Johnson Show, working on a TV show. I'm an ambassador / spokesperson for AARP. I am the first chief criminal officer on the planet for Arcos Labs, is who I work for that. I lead a very blessed life that I absolutely do not deserve, but that I am grateful to have. And I work hard every single day to protect businesses and consumers from the type of person that I used to be. And I take that shit very seriously. I am very thankful for my life. And I want you guys to know, I'm telling my bio story today. It took 36 episodes to get to it, but I want you guys to know that even the people who listen to this show, the reason I'm able to do this today is that you take the time to listen to me and you give me that opportunity to do this. And I truly appreciate it. So I guess that's the show today. All right. There's a hell of a lot more to the story than that. But I mean, I could go on. The Anglerfish podcast had several hours of it. But I just want you guys to know that I'm thankful for every single one of you for taking the time to listen to me and to giving me the opportunity that I have. And I take that seriously, and I will not forsake that. I'm Brett Johnson. This is the Brett Johnson Show. What do we say? We say stay safe, stay secure, and stay vigilant. At the end of the day, this is the Brett Johnson Show. And the lesson to be learned, at the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. I'm Brett Johnson. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.